The state of heart was like the heart power, could not be touched or seen by others. Seemed useless, but in reality it was needed everywhere. If Xiang Bingyun had a stable state of heart, he wouldn't have had his mental state shattered by Jian Wushuang's sword, causing his strength to plummet by 30%. Perhaps this was a flaw in these revived powerhouses. Their anger had annihilated their composure. One was filled with determination, the other contemplating retreat but unwilling to accept it, their positions clearly defined. Buzz! Xiang Bingyun couldn't hold on any longer. In this moment, he recalled Gu Yuan's fate and hurriedly struck his own chest, attempting to clear his mind. Traitor! How dare you deceive me? Xiang Bingyun roared in anger, yet his body kept retreating. He genuinely didn't want to continue this fight. Moreover, he had been away for too long. This place was close to the Great Sea region, and with Zhen Weiyang's speed, he could return at any moment. These two individuals with such power must be princes from some faction. Especially Jian Wushuang, who once exuded Zhen Weiyang's aura, even though it was absent now. But if he was a sitting prince of Zhen Weiyang, his temperament being what it was, he would undoubtedly notice their absence if he came to the great desolate wilderness. If someone was left alone outside, they would surely perish. Little did he know that Zhen Weiyang had long arrived in the great desolate wilderness, aware of their situation but utterly indifferent. In Zhen Weiyang's eyes, only absolute strength mattered. Emperors, heavenly courts, they were all mere passing clouds. However, Xiang Bingyun was ignorant of all this, and at this moment he made up his mind. Let's go! Xiang Bingyun retreated and then concealed himself in the void. After a ripple in space, he vanished. Gone! Jian Wushuang was somewhat surprised. Just like that, he left? Just after Xiang Bingyun left, the space where Jian Wushuang and the others were distorted and changed. Several majestic figures became faintly visible, then instantly solidified. In the last moment, these majestic beings were still far from Jian Wushuang and the others. But in an instant, their figures and pressure arrived, followed by their physical bodies. A wail! A faint Buddhist chant echoed through the void. What's this? Jian Wushuang was utterly astonished. Every one of these majestic beings gave him a unique feeling that was exclusive to Zhen Weiyang. It was the peculiar aura of an emperor. So many emperors? Jian Wushuang felt uneasy, but his keen intellect made him realize instantly that these beings didn't come for him. It must be because of that mysterious ancient temple and the revived entity. But even if that revived being was an emperor, it shouldn't have attracted so many emperors here. Surprised though he was, Jian Wushuang maintained the necessary respect for the powerful figures around him. He immediately bowed deeply. Junior, Great Sea Region, Jian Wushuang. He introduced himself, feeling the weight of the gazes from the emperor-level experts in the room. He continued after taking a breath. I'll greet all the emperor lords. Virtuous. The leader of the group was none other than the heaven-reaching Lord Buddha. Heaven-reaching Buddha's towering body emitted endless golden fate energy. He looked at Jian Wushuang and said with a faint smile, "Little virtuous one, there's no need to be so polite." "Thank you, Emperor." Jian Wushuang had roamed through countless realms and had seen many big scenes. However, this was the first time he had seen so many emperors. Emperor Dongyan, who was standing next to the heaven-reaching Buddha, did not care about this. He even despised the heaven-reaching Buddha for being hypocritical in front of the younger generation. In his opinion, the heaven-reaching Buddha loved the so-called etiquette the most. He wanted everyone to worship him. The little monk, who had regained his senses, also came to his senses. He quickly put his palms together and lowered his head slightly. Lord Buddha! Wuliang Buddha's eyes were wide open at this moment. He looked at the little monk and said in surprise, "Hu Qing, you've comprehended an ultimate Tao." The little monk had lived on Wuliang Mountain since he was young. Although there were hundreds of millions of monks living on the mountain, as the emperor, he knew every single one of the monks living in his Tao arena. Yes, at this moment, the little monk's expression was calm, and his obsession with Buddhism had faded. Instead, the Zen in his heart had allowed him to comprehend the Tao. This is extraordinary goodness. Although Hu Qing belonged to the Wuliang mountain, in the eyes of the Buddha, he was the holy land of the Buddha realm. Hu Qing's comprehension of the ultimate Tao was a blessing for their Buddhist sect. Yes, for how many years? There hasn't been another who attained the 7th level of the ultimate Tao within the 3,000 worlds. Emperor Dongyan also discerned the profound aura emanating from Hu Qing. It was clearly a certain form of the ultimate Tao, and it seemed that he had traveled quite far along this path. Upon careful observation, Wuliang Buddha also noticed the considerable progress Hu Qing had made on the ultimate Tao. Indeed, just as I expected. Impressive? Wuliang Buddha said, his surface displaying a pleased expression, but deep down, he harbored a hidden threat. 30 million years, and he has reached the 6th level of the ultimate Tao. When Hu Qing returns to the 3,000 worlds, he can select any Emperor Supreme technique from our Wuliang mountain. The heaven-reaching Buddha praised and then turned to the Wuliang Buddha, saying, Wuliang, with Hu Qing's talent, he can be appointed as an emperor's successor. Originally a novice monk under the Wuliang mountain, Hu Qing had received all the compliments from the heaven-reaching Buddha. Emperor Dongyan shook his head in amazement. Regardless of whose disciple they were in the 3,000 worlds, discovering a practitioner who comprehended the ultimate Tao was cause for celebration. Emperor Dongyan regarded Hu Qing with a much gentler expression. He could sense that Hu Qing's disposition was unlike that of Wuliang or heaven-reaching. Instead, it was an innate quality, one he found increasingly endearing. As he looked at this young successor, he couldn't help but think of his own disciple from ages past. That disciple was his pride and joy. In just 1,000,000 years, he had attained the 7th level of the ultimate Tao, becoming the most talented Grand Yen Immortal in the history of the 3,000 worlds. 1,000,000 years, the 7th level of the ultimate Tao, reaching the peak of the perfected 9 revolutions of cultivation. Such accomplishments were unimaginable before. Even Jian Wushuang wouldn't have dared to assert that he could achieve this in 1,000,000 years, even with his confidence in mastering the extreme Tao and heart power now. Unfortunately, this genius, who had once captured the imagination of the entire world, succumbed to emotional turmoil. His shattered heart led to an unstable state of heart, rushed attempts at fusion, and ultimately, a failed fusion, which forever denied him the opportunity to advance to the emperor level. Emotions, Tao both damaged. In the end, he self-destructed, his consciousness utterly annihilated. Since that incident, Emperor Dongyan had refrained from accepting personal disciples. Even though the world might have forgotten that disciple's name, the emperor had never forgotten him. He remained in Dongyan's heart. A heavenly miracle. The attention of the emperors was fixed on the young Samanera. For the moment, Jian Wushuang was left forgotten. Yet he didn't mind. The others assumed Hu Qing took 30 million years to reach the 6th level of the ultimate Tao, while Jian Wushuang, a newcomer, had directly stepped into the 6th level of the ultimate Tao. Although the truth was different, Jian Wushuang chose not to correct their misunderstanding. So, this young benefactor saved you, I presume, Wuliang Buddha said with a smile, looking at Jian Wushuang. Yes. The young Samanera Hu Qing replied softly. Jian Wushuang listened carefully, realizing that the little Samanera had hidden many details, and now the little Samanera was looking at him with a smile in his eyes. Junior and Hu Qing supported each other all the way, barely driving away the enemies. It was not my sole achievement. Although he had been observing from the sidelines and didn't know much about the distribution of power in the 3,000 great worlds, he could roughly tell that heaven-reaching Buddha and Wuliang, despite both being part of Buddha realm, did not belong to the same faction. And Emperor Dongyan was not a Buddhist practitioner, not someone easy to deal with for both Wuliang and heaven-reaching Buddha. This time, they probably came together just for that grand temple. Being around such powerful figures, he had to be cautious. Cause and effect cycle. Thoughts are hard to settle. Wuliang Buddha waved his hand, and a stream of light slid down. This item should have some connection with you. Diligently studying it in the future will help your state of heart and mind. Thank you, Senior. After clearly seeing the item, Jian Wushuang's heart trembled. He quickly bowed to express his gratitude. The treasure in the stream of light was a short piece of wood, perfectly matching the one he had obtained earlier. Could it be? Jian Wushuang's heart shook. He now understood that the short piece of wood he received was a gift from Wuliang Buddha. If that was the case, didn't it mean that Wuliang Buddha knew he was a practitioner of heart power cultivation? He also must be aware of the existence of the Qixin Temple and Little Samanara's original realm. But he didn't dare to have any doubts. He wore a surprised expression on his face while hiding his amazement. Oh, by the way, the one chasing after you two should be him. Wuliang Buddha extended his arm and directly grabbed into the void. His arm casually extended for millions of miles, tearing apart the endless void and capturing the escaping Xiang Bingyun. The emperors remained very calm. Even the little Samanara was composed. Only Jian Wushuang was extremely surprised. There was nothing he could do. He only knew a few emperors, and the ones he had truly seen were even fewer. He had seen Jin Wuyang a few times, but it didn't compare to the awe-inspiring presence of Wuliang Buddha. Ah! Xiang Bingyun, who was suddenly grabbed from the void, looked astonished. Then, seeing the majestic figures of the emperors above the void, his eyes widened. How is this possible? I was already far away from here. Even if they're emperors, they couldn't have grabbed me from such a distance. Xiang Bingyun was both shocked and afraid. He was shocked by the presence of so many emperors and afraid because he knew these emperors had come not for him but for his lord's grand plan. Esteemed seniors, I am the ruler of the ancient heavenly court in the Great Sea region, and my lord. Before Xiang Bingyun could finish his words, his throat was crushed by the immense hand of the Wuliang Buddha. Dust returns to dust, soil returns to soil. Wuliang Buddha waved his hand, and countless tiny bone fragments scattered from his palm. They should not have appeared in this world. Wuliang Buddha clasped his hands together, restoring his former compassionate expression. Emperor Dongyan sneered inwardly, thinking, revenge is one thing, but if they don't revive, the secrets of the Qixin Temple might never see the light of day. With a wave of his hand, a perfected 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal was lifted into the air. Jian Wushuang was shaken internally but maintained a respectful demeanor. Such powerful beings could only be looked up to. At any moment, they could extinguish him. Both of you wait here for a moment. Later, a Grand Yen Immortal from our heaven-reaching Buddhist realm will meet you here, Wuliang Buddha said. The emperors came and left swiftly. As their voices faded away, their imposing figures gradually dissipated until they disappeared completely from Jian Wushuang's sight. After several breaths, even the aura of the emperors vanished from the void. Only then did Jian Wushuang exhale deeply. The feeling of relief elevated his mood slightly, although the elevation was minuscule. The injuries on the little monk's body had mostly healed. He turned to Jian Wushuang and smiled faintly. Kind sir, thank you for earlier. Everyone has their secrets. There's no need to speak of them. Jian Wushuang smiled back. He only wanted to leave the great desolate wilderness, but the path to the Great Sea region was blocked by those corpses and skeletons. Given the imminent battle between the emperors over there, he couldn't return for a short while. His only option was to go heaven-reaching Buddhist realm. However, after just meeting the high-ranking members of the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm, his opinion of them was almost non-existent. Since the heaven-reaching Buddha asked him to wait for such a Grand Yen Immortal, he would wait. He would find an opportunity to leave later. Now that he had broken through to become a Grand Yen Immortal, he had the ability to travel to other worlds. But the thought of crossing the entire great desolate wilderness, which would take tens of thousands of years, gave him a headache. Inside the Qixin Temple, Fenghua, it seems like your High Commander, Xiang Bingyun, has fallen. Luya, who controlled the great desolate wilderness heavenly Tao, remarked. Naturally, he was aware of everything happening in the great desolate wilderness. He had sensed Xiang Bingyun's demise the moment he was killed. Xiang Bingyun had followed Emperor Fenghua to battle his entire life and had a personality much like Emperor Fenghua's. Naturally, Emperor Fenghua valued him greatly, thinking he had the potential to become an emperor. However, now he had fallen just after reviving. Luya had always been at odds with Emperor Fenghua. Now he couldn't help but add fuel to the fire. It seems he was killed while trying to chase down a few grand yen immortals. What a useless waste. He couldn't even kill those two youngsters and ended up falling himself. You! Emperor Fenghua was furious, but considering that Luya now controlled the great desolate wilderness, he suppressed his anger and said coldly, I will avenge him personally. For now, we must consider the bigger picture. Haha, revenge. Do you even know who killed him? Luya sneered. Who else but Jin Wuyang? Sooner or later, I will kill him and avenge our past disgrace. Have you forgotten how he humiliated you back then? Emperor Fenghua gritted his teeth. The other emperors closed their eyes, contemplating. Upon hearing their conversation, they all sighed. Who among them hadn't been humiliated by Jin Wuyang? Back then, Jin Wuyang had treated them like stray dogs and expelled them from the Great Sea region. They had to endure it due to their lack of strength. But who could have imagined that Jin Wuyang would progress so quickly, advancing from a third-tier emperor to a fourth-tier emperor in less than 10,000 years, directly coming to the great desolate wilderness. In his pursuit of the Qixin Temple's whereabouts, he humiliated them in every possible way and eventually slaughtered them all in the great desolate wilderness, using their corpses as a path for his cultivation. Humph! Luya didn't want to dwell on the past. Instead, he calmly stated the current situation. What? People from the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm have arrived. How did they find out about the Qixin Temple? This shouldn't be possible. Luya, when did they arrive? How many emperors came, and what are their strengths? A series of questions were thrown at him. The individuals who had been ambitiously planning to inherit the Qixin's legacy and become the universe masters suddenly felt their confidence waver. Luya looked at them, becoming increasingly convinced that his choice had been right. He had the foresight to cultivate the desolate Tao from the moment he was suppressed. When he recovered, he had even revived the great desolate wilderness's heavenly Tao. Since the ancient era, he had felt that everyone's state of mind had undergone a huge change. They were reaching for the unreachable, their ambitions soaring high. Such was the opinion of Luya towards these individuals. The Qixin Temple had bestowed upon them a divine Tao, making them excessively proud. In the ancient era, they could have shared their knowledge with Jin Wuyang. If only they had joined forces with Jin Wuyang to explore the Qixin Temple, they might not have met their downfall and fallen into the state they were in now. When they saw Jin Wuyang's potential, they were afraid that Jin Wuyang would take advantage of them. So they sealed the Qixin Temple and refused to hand it over even if they died. Jin Wuyang was so angry that he went crazy and searched for the disambiguation god temple in the Grand Priest's domain. Then, he killed all of them in the Great Desolate. Greed, arrogance, jealousy. With such a temperament, how could they inherit Qixin's Tao's devouring Tao? The strongest among them was only at the 8th level, and his strength was around the 4th tier. Qixin's Tao was endless, and even if he cultivated to the 10th level, he might not be able to control the universe and become a universe master. He might as well settle for the next best thing and study the Tao of the 3 divine lords. Now that he had entered the 8th level of the desolate Tao and controlled the vast great desolate wilderness, he already had the strength of a 4th-tier emperor. His understanding of the desolate Tao was not inferior to those who practiced the Qixin Tao. Since he gained control over the great desolate wilderness, his insights into the desolate Tao deepened. It wouldn't be long before he reached the 9th level of the desolate Tao. Once he elevated the great desolate wilderness to a high-grade world, he would step into 5th tier, dominating the entire universe. The more powerful he was, the more generous the rewards from the Qixin Temple would be. Although he had inherited the Tao of the 3 divine lords, the rewards would be relatively lesser, but how much less could it be? Luya caressed his left arm. This was a gift that he had received after he increased his strength in controlling the great desolate wilderness. It was an arm. He didn't know if this arm was the severed arm of that mighty figure, but it had already surpassed the power of a supreme treasure without being refined. Ever since it had been taken over by him, its power had increased by several times. Even now, he had absolute confidence in facing Jin Wuyang. As for the many emperors in the hall, each one was his equal. Over millions of years, these 18 emperors included 5 with the power of 3rd tier and 11 with 2nd tier. Then there was Daogong, who could rival Jin Wuyang in the ancient era. If Daogong hadn't possessed third-tier power back then, Jin Wuyang wouldn't have needed to banish them to the great desolate wilderness. He could have annihilated them within the Great Sea region. Unfortunately, Daogong's strength did not break through again until his death. After this revival, his strength barely reached the level of fourth tier, so he could not threaten Jin Wuyang at all. Everyone, I've said before that I will protect the Qixin Temple, and this is where you all come in. Luya scanned the entire hall and continued. But there's one thing you all need to understand. Power speaks in this world. With numerous emperors arriving in the great desolate wilderness, not only from the Buddhist realm but also from other major worlds, some of these powerful beings are no weaker than Jin Wuyang. Daogong, who had always occupied the seat of honor in the hall, opened his eyes at this moment and spoke. Luya, just say what you want to say. Yes, speak your mind. We have accumulated millions of years, and our strength has improved. Combined with the blessings of the Qixin Temple, we are no longer what we used to be. Back then, they had feigned death in the great desolate wilderness, pouring the blood of millions of Grand Yen immortals along with their own into the Qixin Temple. Their purpose was to activate the power of the Qixin Temple. However, no one had expected that it would take millions of years before the Qixin Temple reciprocated their efforts. Their consciousness had been trapped within the Qixin Temple for millions of years, persevering in the cultivation of the Qixin Dao. Naturally, their strength had greatly increased. They also obtained numerous treasures from the sacrificial altar of the Qixin Temple. Although many emperors had arrived now, it was not as dire as the time during the ancient era, where they had no power to resist. All right, let me be clear. I now control the great desolate wilderness. Are there any objections if we make this our battleground? Naturally, everyone nodded. If we engage in battle, all of you will follow my command. Is that acceptable? At these words, the atmosphere in the hall grew tense, and everyone fell silent. Luya, don't go too far. We all inherit the divine Tao of the Qixin Temple. Although you are the newly appointed divine lord, you don't have the authority to command us. It was Emperor Fenghua who spoke up. He could tolerate Luya in many matters, but what he couldn't tolerate was being overshadowed by Luya. Ever since inheriting the Qixin Dao, they no longer needed to look up to Jin Wuyang. If they could bow to Luya, they would have done so long ago, and there would be no need for Luya to act like this. Everyone, don't you understand yet? Luya didn't adopt a harsh tone this time. He knew these people's temperaments well. The more aggressive he was, the more they resisted. Being aggressive wouldn't work. Persuasion was the key. That scoundrel Jin Wuyang probably has revealed the existence of the Qixin Temple to the entire original universe. By revealed, I mean everyone in the entire universe knows. It's very likely that in the near future, even the powerful beings from different universes will know about the Qixin Temple. Luya took a deep breath and continued. Even terrifying entities from the river of time and space will come to the original universe because of the Qixin Temple. Let alone in the distant future, just look at now. In the great desolate wilderness alone, I've sensed 5 fourth-tier emperors within less than a day. 5 fourth-tier emperors. Everyone gasped. They had originally thought it was just Jin Wuyang alone, perhaps with a few emperors from the Buddhist realm. The Buddhists from the Buddhist realm, Jin Wuyang from the Grand Domain, and 2 unfamiliar faces. Besides these 4 emperors, there are 7 third-tier emperors and 16 second-tier emperors. Let's not even mention the levels below second tier. Luya resumed his seat on the throne and concluded, I don't mind, because this is the great desolate wilderness, filled with endless corpses. As long as I gather them into one entity, they can't harm me. I will guard the Qixin Temple. But if you think you can preserve your lives here, I won't interfere either. The Qixin Temple was divided into inner and outer halls. They could only communicate with the inner hall through the sacrificial altar. The power they wielded in the outer hall wasn't significant. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been suppressed by Jin Wuyang back in the day. Now that Luya had become a Tao ancestor, controlling the great desolate wilderness, he wasn't afraid of those foreign emperors. However, they weren't Tao ancestors. The strongest among them were only ordinary fourth-tier emperors. They had nowhere to hide now. It was too late to escape. Damn that Jin Wuyang. Isn't he afraid that the Qixin Temple might fall into the hands of those universe masters? He's despicable, truly low. Right now, he can't defeat us alone. But what if he brings in a large group of emperors? He hasn't changed a bit. Just as shameless as before. Everyone. Now we need to unite and resist the external enemies together. Dao Gong stood up. He understood Liu Ye's intentions. Although he knew they would suffer losses, he had no choice but to stand up now. In the depths of the vast, great, desolate wilderness, the first batch of major factions that entered the vast, great, desolate wilderness gradually gathered together. Jin Wuyang, how much do you know about the information from the Qixin Temple? A majestic figure in golden armor, exuding an aura of arrogance, looked at Jin Wuyang. Donglin, Divine Emperor, the information I know about the Qixin Temple is just that much. I have already transmitted everything I know to you. Jin Wuyang smiled faintly, sitting cross-legged in the void, calm and composed. Humph, don't take us for fools. The Qixin Temple drifted here through the river of time and space. Who knows what mysteries it holds inside? You are so generous in spreading the news about the emergence of the Qixin Temple. Do you want us to lead the way for you? The golden-armored emperor glared at Jin Wuyang. He was the only supreme ruler among many surrounding worlds, controlling higher worlds. How could he act as a pawn for Jin Wuyang? The emperors of the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm also appeared around Jin Wuyang. The heaven-reaching Buddha had long known about the strange movements of the great desolate wilderness. When Jin Wuyang spread the news that the Qixin Temple had appeared, he immediately brought all the emperors and many grand Yen immortals over. Brother Jin, the matter of the Qixin Temple is of great importance. Since we are willing to cross numerous celestial realms to come here, you should give us some respect. Emperor Dongyan spoke first, paying no attention to the leading role played by heaven-reaching Buddha. I've said it before, I only know this much. If you're afraid, then don't go. Go back and comprehend the great Tao. I wish you an early ascent to the pinnacle of the universe. Jin Wuyang sneered. He didn't dare to take on any danger and only dreamed about the great Tao of the universe. He had spread the news from the Qixin Temple in order to attract the attention of the experts from all over the world and then fish in troubled waters. At this moment, these people wanted an explanation from him. They simply wanted him to be the first to attack. To be able to become the ruler of a large force. How could he be a reckless person? If he would have been killed long ago. The Qixin Temple contained secrets that could make one the universe master. How could it be safe? Just the 18 divine generals within were comparable to a major force. Jin Wuyang, don't underestimate us. We came because we trust you. If you're unwilling to share the information about the Qixin Temple, don't blame us for being impolite. The golden-armored emperor threatened. I heard that your Great Sea region has expanded to its limit. I wonder if it has caught up with my Donglin realm. As soon as the words of the golden-armored emperor fell, a terrifying aura erupted instantly. A golden dragon shot out from his palm, its body moving at an incredible speed. The power of an emperor could easily shatter the void in the great desolate wilderness. This terrifying dragon, the moment it appeared, treated the void as if it were nothing, directly rushing towards the Great Sea region. Although the Grand Sea region had expanded to its limit, the great desolate wilderness was not considered large. Because the origin had already collapsed during the ancient era, it was difficult to expand the land. Even if Jin Wuyang was powerful, he could only open up this great desolate wilderness. If the Great Sea region advanced further, he could only improve his own great Tao. The higher the level of the great Tao, the stronger the world he could control. Jin Wuyang had been opening up the realm to the limit, which was equivalent to the great Tao reaching the limit. If it were not for the cancer of the great desolate wilderness, he would have long raised the Great Sea region to the peak of a medium-grade world. Now that the emperor in golden armor was using a flood dragon to spy on his Great Sea region, how could he agree? Even if he couldn't spy on anything, the might of an emperor would allow the flood dragon to enter the Great Sea region and destroy countless smaller worlds, depleting the prime essences of the Great Sea region. I don't even care about the Donglin realm. And you're not going to instruct me about my own Great Sea region, Zhen Wuyang said coldly. Great Sea region, heavenly court. Zhen Wuyang's true form appeared, gazing toward the great desolate wilderness, pointing into the void. Buzz, buzz. A muffled explosion echoed deep into the great desolate wilderness. The flood dragon stranded at the edge of the great desolate wilderness before reaching the borders of the Great Sea region. The once lively golden dragon now resembled a motionless image in the void. The emperor in golden armor snorted, attempting to retract his divine technique, but he couldn't call back the golden flood dragon. He tore apart the void with his massive hands, trying to grab the dragon, but it eluded his grasp. The dragon seemed etched into the void, swaying gently with the air but not advancing an inch. At this moment, Zhen Wuyang rose slowly. With a wave of his hand, the golden jiaolong was cut from the cracks in the void, which then sealed back up. Dong Lin, don't think that mastering a high-grade world gives you the right to be arrogant in my presence. I have slain emperors far more than your Donglin realm. Crack. Zhen Wuyang directly crushed the flood dragon into powder. The supreme treasure shattered in Zhen Wuyang's hands, scattered casually in the void. You! Emperor Donglin glared in anger. But Zhen Wuyang's strength was indeed formidable. In his own Dao arena they would not fear, but now they were in the great desolate wilderness. Though it wasn't Zhen Wuyang's Dao arena, if a conflict arose, they had no means against Zhen Wuyang's might. Moreover, he had several emperors from the Donglin realm behind him. Their strength was only at the second-tier emperor level. If they clashed with Zhen Wuyang, he could easily kill them. That would be a huge loss for them. Their main goal was the Qixin Temple. There was no need to confront Zhen Wuyang head-on. Donglin, this is the great desolate wilderness. Though a Dao ancestor is here now, this Earth realm is jointly managed by the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm and the Great Sea region. Don't cause trouble or else, he finished, nodding meaningfully at Zhen Wuyang. Heaven-reaching Buddha thought the situation wasn't significant enough, so they directly sided with Zhen Wuyang. Their implication was clear. If Zhen Wuyang acted, they would support him. They were on the same boat. But how could Zhen Wuyang not understand the character of this neighbor heaven-reaching Buddha? By aligning himself with Zhen Wuyang at this moment, he implied that the vast great desolate wilderness was jointly managed by both their realms, but it was subtly suggesting ownership of the Qixin Temple. Zhen Wuyang felt a headache. These emperors had survived till now, becoming formidable existences in the universe. They wouldn't charge straight to the Qixin god just because of a simple message. This was an oversight he had made. I've overlooked something, but regarding the specific situation inside the Qixin Temple, I know very little. It's right there. If you're willing to explore together, let's go. But if you're hesitant and want to take advantage of numbers, trying to fish in troubled waters, you can leave now, Zhen Wuyang said clearly. He knew that if he didn't take these people to Qixin Temple now, more emperors would come later, asking him the same thing. It was better to bring them along and try their luck now. Heaven-reaching Lord Buddha joined his palms, smiling gently. Virtuous. Numerous emperors dispersed into the air and reappeared at the road of immortal bones where Jian Wushuang was desperately trying to escape. The towering temple reached billions of miles into the sky, its bronze-colored surface imbued with elusive and powerful runes, constantly suppressing the void. Swish, 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 swish. Dozens of figures appeared outside the Qixin Temple. It was Zhen Wuyang and his group. Daogong, Luya, Fenghua. Zhen Wuyang appeared ordinary among the group of emperors, but his words were exceptionally domineering. I have come specifically to pay respects to you seniors. Although he said it was a greeting, he brought a large group of emperors, making it impossible to move in the Qixin Temple Hall. Dong Yen, your Yen Divine Array can be set up now, Zhen Wuyang said, turning his head and smiling. He had just said he came to pay respects, but he turned around and had Dong Yen set up the array. Zhen Wuyang's shamelessness embarrassed the emperors who saw him for the first time. Indeed, he was a formidable presence that could destroy the entire Great Sea region during that proud ancient era. He had been ruthless when annihilating his own people in the past. Now, cooperating with him, Emperor Donglin sighed inwardly, unsure if it was good or bad. The Yen Divine Array was created by Emperor Dong Yen himself. It had a great reputation in the surrounding domains. Once the array was formed, even emperors couldn't teleport through the void. Buzz! Array formation, rise! Emperor Dong Yen waved the flag, and a diagram comparable to a small world descended from the sky, suppressing a third of the void in the great desolate wilderness. After the large array was set up, Zhen Wuyang's concerns dissipated. At least those old fellows from the ancient era couldn't escape now. Besides the Yen Divine Array guarding, heaven-reaching Buddha also took out the precious 1,000 treasures Xianxia. Everything outside was clear to the emperors inside the Qixin temple. They weren't idle either, immediately activating the power of the Qixin temple. Everything outside was clear to the emperors inside the Qixin temple. They weren't idle either, immediately activating the power of the Qixin temple. Boom! The Yen Divine Array buzzed in the void. Every component of the huge diagram accelerated its rotation. Although the power of the Qixin temple was strong, those emperors couldn't fully unleash their power. Relying on the Qixin temple, they could only barely contend with many emperors. Luya! Get ready to attack! Dao Gong shouted angrily. His figure appeared outside the main gate of the Qixin temple, and an ancient and majestic aura rose into the sky. The runes outside the Qixin temple lit up instantly. Dao Gong's eyes were dazzling as he rushed toward Dong Yen inside the Yen Divine Array. The countless corpses surrounding the hall, acting as the outermost defense, turned into powder when a divine force swept over them. They floated toward the Qixin temple along the ancient road of immortal bones. The two perfected 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals, the shadow demons, guarding outside the temple suddenly opened their eyes. They had been waiting for this moment for too long. This was their lord, Luya, summoning them. Set up the formation. Luya's eyes flickered. He gently pressed his left hand, and his blood-red arm suddenly burst with power. This force stirred millions of Grand Yen Immortals. Swish! 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 Welcome, my lord! 36 perfected 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals appeared instantly behind Luya. These perfected 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals used the corpses of billions of Grand Yen Immortals as their bodies, and the endless Grand Yen Immortals ultimately transformed into the flesh and blood of these 36 experts. At this point, they had surpassed the realm of Grand Yen Immortals. Each of them possessed the aura of an emperor, but the Tao within their bodies had withered when they condensed their flesh and blood. Now they were all like living dead. Activate the formation! Luya roared again. The grand formation rose, and a colossal figure the size of the Qixin temple appeared outside the Qixin temple. This was the dead spirit formation set up by Luya. Luya obtained this formation from inside the Qi God temple. During the ancient times, he pursued the Qi God Tao wholeheartedly but never practiced it. It wasn't until true martial yang rose that he began practices. He didn't hesitate to let billions of great Yen Immortals accompany him in death just to perfect this formation. Now, the revived great Yen Immortals were becoming a part of him, ready to battle for him. Dao Gong, quickly kill Dong Yen and break the formation. The rest of you, suppress heaven-reaching Buddha together. Leave the rest to me. Luya directed the entire dead spirit formation. The human-shaped figures formed by the formation also bore his appearance. Boom! Dao Gong, who had cultivated the Qixin Dao to the 8th level, was indeed fast. Even though the void was sealed, his speed was much faster than Emperor Dong Yan's. In an instant, he arrived at the location of Dong Yen within the formation. The formation blockade worked both ways. Dong Yen himself couldn't use instant teleportation. He had to rely on the large formation at the formation's core and confront Dao Gong head-on. I heard you were the leader of the Great Sea region during the ancient era. Today, I will properly face you. Although Dong Yan's strength hadn't reached the Tier 4, he had the defense of the core formation. Against an old guy who had just entered Tier 4, he had some confidence. I happen to want to meet you, these foreign realm experts, too. Let's see if your Dao is stronger or mine. As soon as Dao Gong finished speaking, he attacked directly. Once the leader during the ancient era, Dao Gong was already a Tier 3 emperor back then. Now, he had advanced further to become a Tier 4 emperor and received blessings from Qixin. His strength was comparable to Zhen Wuyang of the ancient times. The current emperor Dong Yen didn't pose a threat to him. A whisk appeared in Dao Gong's hand. With a gentle wave, countless white feathers surrounded the entire core formation, then suddenly tightened. The pressure from the whisk felt like a giant's palm. But Dong Yen at the formation's core remained calm and held onto the core formation tightly. Under the immense pressure, the core formation's operation sped up rapidly. "This won't last much longer if it continues like this," Dong Yen exclaimed in horror and quickly transmitted a message to heaven-reaching Buddha. "Dao Gong is of the 4th tier. I can't hold on. Quickly have Feng Mo save me." Heaven-reaching Buddha, Zhen Wuyang, Donglin Divine Emperor, and Feng Mo, 4 Tier 4 emperors. 16 palace-protecting divine generals suppressed heaven-reaching Buddha in the Qixin temple. Although it was said to be a suppression, they were actually keeping an eye on him. It was best for both sides not to make a move and wait for others to determine the outcome. In the current Qixin temple, Luya, the strongest figure, resisted 3 4th-tier emperors alone. After all, the great desolate wilderness was Luya's Dao arena. While Feng Mo was powerful, he had just entered the 4th tier and wasn't as strong as Dao Gong. Only Zhen Wuyang's strength was formidable enough to contend with him. As for Donglin Divine Emperor, he guarded the rear and protected many ordinary emperors. In battles at this level, those ordinary emperors couldn't even intervene. They became burdens instead, wasting the power of a 4th-tier emperor for nothing. With the power from the Dao arena and the Dead Spirit formation, Luya now had the strength of an excellent Tier 4 emperor. No matter how strong Zhen Wuyang was, he couldn't gain any advantage from Luya. "Zhen Wuyang, I originally thought you would come to the great desolate wilderness alone, but I didn't expect you to bring so many helpers. You truly disappoint me," Luya said as he attacked. Enormous fist shadows fell like shooting stars, bombarding Emperor Feng Mo. Meanwhile, Zhen Wuyang mainly targeted the weakest link. This was his Dao arena. The more he fought, the stronger he would become. He could mobilize the great desolate wilderness's heavenly Dao. He was the Dao ancestor of this world. Although it was only a middle-grade world, the power it bestowed upon him could still shatter Feng Mo's divine body. "Damn it!" Zhen Wuyang cursed angrily. The current situation was far from favorable for them. Dong Yen was on the verge of collapse, and Feng Mo on this side was struggling to lift its head. He couldn't unleash his true strength in such a short time. This was Luya's Dao arena. While fighting against Luya here, he was constantly rejected by the Dao of the great desolate wilderness, suppressing his power by 30%. Meanwhile, heaven-reaching Buddha sat above, calm and composed. The power of the 1,000 treasures Kasaya was enough to rival 16 divine generals. There were only a few among them who were at the middle tier 3. If it were not for the Qixin Hall, heaven-reaching Buddha would have killed them in an instant. "Wuliang, Dong Yen is in dire straits. Hurry and send reinforcements," heaven-reaching Buddha said calmly, still leisurely allowing Wuliang, a tier 3 emperor, to deal with the tier 4 emperor Dao Gong. The allure of the Qixin temple was immense. Just a few pieces of information from Zhen Wuyang were enough to throw the entire original universe into chaos. They were only the first batch. He had never thought of breaking the Qixin temple now. He would wait until everyone gathered and then explore the temple together. From the initial stage of the original universe, he had come to the Qixin temple in the Great Sea region. It was not that simple. There was probably someone behind all of this. Even though he guarded the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm all year round, he was well informed. The Tier 5 emperors had all left the original universe for the river of time and space. There was an even greater secret within. The origin of the original universe had started to dissipate when it was born, and now countless chaos cycles had passed, and the origin was almost depleted. Inside the primitive universe was a powerful being, the Forbidden Demon Lord, who had once dominated the river of time and space. If the origin were depleted, and the Forbidden Demon Lord emerged, the original universe would have no choice but to migrate. The Forbidden Demon Lord was a powerful life form born from the river of time and space. It appeared in every cycle of time. In the previous cycle, it appeared in their original universe, swallowing the entire universe. The forbidden creature was suppressed to the core of the original universe by the supreme rules. This information was known to very few, only a few Tier 5 emperors and a handful of Tier 4 rulers were aware of it. The being who created the Buddhist sect left the original universe after the fragmentation of the celestial realm. When he left behind this cycle reincarnation scripture. That being deduced the future, used the eye of heavenly mechanics to see the future of the original universe. In the future, the original universe was a traceless starry sky. The entire universe was devoured by the forbidden creature, and the emperors in the universe fled with the great Yen immortals. All other life was obliterated. Even with foresight of the future, that being left the original universe. For that being, this universe would soon perish, not worth staying here. The forbidden creatures were terrifying existences that all experts feared in the river of time and space. For a universe without a master, it represented destruction. Now, with the sudden appearance of the Qixin Temple, could it be a chance bestowed by the supreme rules, allowing the original universe to overcome this calamity? Tongtian Buddha pondered this, his gaze sweeping over the many emperors in the Qixin Temple, then shifting to Daogong and Luyen. In the end, he shook his head. Among this group, none were saviors. What Tongtian Buddha didn't know was that the Buddhist leader who foresaw the future in those years was eventually killed by the supreme rules and then reincarnated. Fate was shackled, and the supreme rules left a glimmer of vitality. Eventually, the Qixin Temple drifted through countless cycles in the river of time and arrived in the original universe. This grand gift was a chance given by the supreme rules to the original universe. If grasped, it could give birth to a universe master in this era. If not, be prepared to escape. The slim chance left by the supreme rules, apart from a universe master, no one could drive away that forbidden devil lord. Thus, there was a great possibility of a universe master emerging in this era. Tongtian Buddha, who had comprehended all this, squinted his eyes. In his view, among all the people present, only Zhen Wuyang had a slight chance. No matter how he looked at others, they were not beings destined to achieve the great path. Everything had its predestined outcome. The Qixin Temple would definitely not leave the original universe, so there was no need for him to stay above. But watching the tigers fight from above was leisurely for him. As for the small fry below, the more deaths, the better, saving him from dealing with those opportunistic fellows. The many emperors outside the Qixin Temple, under the protection of Donglin, could only watch a few fourth-tier emperors battle. He never imagined that, in the current Great War, even third-tier emperors couldn't intervene. As for heaven-reaching Buddha's words about rescuing Emperor Dongyan, they pretended not to hear. Who would be foolish enough to battle a fourth-tier emperor now? Even though Daogong was at the bottom among the fourth-tier emperors, those at the third tier were far from being his match. Luya, as the Dao ancestor of the great desolate wilderness, had been watching closely. Not only did he single-handedly bring Feng Mo to the brink of collapse, but he also had the energy to deal with Zhen Wuyang. If they dared to show themselves, they would probably be instantly killed by Luya. In the distance, Emperor Dongyan couldn't hold on any longer. The power of the whisk seemed limitless, steadily rising. At first, he was relaxed, but as time passed, the force of the whisk grew, compressing his own strength bit by bit. In this contest, he quickly couldn't endure it anymore. The defensive formation around the eye of the array began to shatter. Without the protection of the formation, he couldn't hold out against Daogong for more than a few breaths. The Yen Divine Array had 9 eyes of the array, and he was hiding in one of them. However, the great desolate wilderness indeed had Dao ancestors, and Luya directly found his position. He ordered Daogong to kill him. Once he died, the other eyes of the array would naturally be easily destroyed. Emperor Dongyan now regretted not breaking the whisk array himself. Then, he could have used instant movement to escape. Endless pressure enveloped his body. Emperor Dongyan couldn't hold on any longer. He never expected that he would be trapped by his own formation, creating his own tomb. Boom! The eye of the array's defensive formation was shattered, and Emperor Dongyan's true body was revealed. Just as he was about to beg for mercy, he was enveloped entirely by the whisk. Those who spy on the Qixin temple die, Daogong shouted angrily. The power of the feather duster surged again. Without defensive formations, Emperor Dongyan was like thin paper instantly crushed. This was the difference in strength. Although Dongyan was a top third-tier power, facing a fourth-tier emperor, even Daogong, who was at the bottom of the fourth tier, had no difficulty defeating him. Fighting above one's tier might happen in the realm of Grand Yen Immortals, but it absolutely did not occur among emperors. In the realm of Grand Yen Immortals, there might be instances of fighting above one's tier due to some external treasures. However, after becoming emperors, their strength relied on their comprehension of the Tao. Those who could fight above their tier among emperors were unheard of in the original universe. Perhaps the ancestors of the ancient god clan could achieve this, but that old fellow became a fourth-tier emperor the moment he became an emperor. At that time, the original universe didn't even have fifth-tier emperors. With a reluctant roar, Emperor Dongyan fell completely. This being one of the top 3 in the 3,000 Great Worlds had fallen. Emperor Dongyan followed the Yen transformation Tao, and he was not inclined towards battle, and therefore lacked avatars. This time, his fall was genuine. In the Buddhist realm, due to their shared celestial origins, Dongyan's knowledge of Tier 4 emperors was limited. The original universe was vast, yet Tier 3 emperors were still scarce. Now, within the time it takes for a joss stick to burn, one had fallen. The emergence of the Qixin Temple marked the beginning of a great era. This era would become a pivotal point for the entire original universe. Virtuous, Tong Tian Buddha clasped his hands together, chanting silently, guiding Dongyan's departed soul. Daogong, hurry and break the formation, Luya urged, suppressing his inner agitation. Once the formation broke, he would unleash a massacre, channeling the accumulated rage of millions of years. He aimed to turn the great desolate wilderness into a battlefield, slaughtering all those who dared to spy on the Qixin Temple. A majestic Tao descended from the heavens, the fall of an emperor enhancing his dead spirit formation. If he suppressed a Tier 4 emperor, his power would increase. Luya clenched his left hand into the void, and a wave of death qi instantly pervaded the entire space. Feng Mo, who had been constantly oppressed, seemed to be afraid. Without waiting for Daogong to break the formation, he shattered the Yen Divine Array himself. He wanted to escape. Zhen Wuyang is useless. He couldn't stop Luya. Tong Tian Buddha remained inactive in the void above, and Dong Lin went to protect those useless beings, refusing to act. Luya now began to suspect if this group had conspired against him. Feng Mo, don't! Zhen Wuyang shouted angrily. Once the formation broke, their deaths would come faster. If the void was unsealed, not only could they teleport, but Luya could too. What a fool! Zhen muttered under his breath. The situation was beyond salvage now. He didn't care if he faced this alone, but the others would suffer. The Buddhist realm had deployed all its forces, and now that Dongyan had fallen, even more might perish soon. Dong Lin felt a twitch in his eyelids. If he didn't act now, the subordinates he brought with him might all die in the great desolate wilderness. At this moment, he had no choice but to take action. Luya, your opponent is me. Dong Lin flashed a purple light in his forehead, and 6 purple rhombus-shaped crystals appeared behind him. Whoosh! A massive white stone throne appeared beneath Dong Lin, stabilizing him. The purple rhombus-shaped crystals instantly flew into the divine throne. This he obtained from a relic in the river of time and space, a purple crystal throne left behind by an ancient civilization. Boom! A violet light shot out from above the throne, so swift that the Luya had no chance to resist. The purple light pierced through the dead spirit formation controlled by Luya. Relentless, it created 6 holes exuding deathly aura on the necromantic formation. Even the body condensed by the countless Grand Yen Immortals was instantly shattered by the violet light. Luya was momentarily stunned, but with his endless vital energy, it meant nothing. The holes were instantly sealed, and he moved even faster. Before Feng Mo could teleport, Luya grabbed him. Feng Mo, where do you think you're going? Luya sneered and then exerted force. Whoosh! Feng Mo, caught by him, turned into a black smoke and disappeared. What is this? Luya was astonished. The great desolate wilderness was his territory. Yet Feng Mo managed to switch bodies right under his nose. The entity he had captured was just an energy clone. Realizing he had been tricked, Luya roared in anger and vanished from the spot. He had lost the time to pursue Feng Mo, whom he had momentarily stunned. Now he had to deal with the weaker emperors. Scatter and escape, Donglin roared. He had the most followers, but most of the emperors from the Buddhistic realms had duplicates. If they died, they would lose at most a physical body and some treasures. His subordinates didn't have many duplicates. If they died, they were truly gone. Donglin realm was one of the rare high-grade worlds, but its heritage wasn't as strong as other high-grade worlds. He was the only fourth-tier emperor in the Donglin realm, and he had only a few third-tier emperors under him. Originally, when the Qixin temple appeared, he didn't want to bring too many emperors with him. But these emperors were eager to advance further. He couldn't stop them. After all, before the great Tao, the strong would always contend. In such a great opportunity, who would give up? Who would abandon it because of danger? If they feared death, they would not have stood out among the countless experts of the Grand Yen Immortal stage. No one can escape. The figure of Luya appeared behind many emperors, and a death scythe appeared in his hand. Swish! Even teleportation required a brief moment in the world. In this extremely short time, Luya swung the scythe in his hand, and several emperors instantly fell. Some quick-witted emperors left only half of their bodies. The other halves appeared in another place in the vast great desolate wilderness. The scythe of annihilation emitted a desolate aura. Anything it touched would be devoured of life. The emperors whose heads were severed screamed and fell amidst their lamentation and unwillingness. Any remaining emperors had already teleported away. The emperors of the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm had no choice but to hide within the thousand treasures Xianxia. Wuliang Buddha cast a final glance at the Qixin temple and then disappeared within the thousand treasures Xianxia. He had fought against Tongtian Buddha for countless years. Now he understood that if Tongtian wanted him dead, he would have died long ago. The eyes of the Emperor Donglin were bloodshot. Among the fallen emperors were his disciples and clan members. They were all dead now. Daogong, who had already distanced himself, stood in his way. Donglin couldn't save the others even if he wanted to. Don't even think about attacking. It's better for both of us this way. Daogong squinted his eyes and sneered. They had won this great battle decisively. Tongtian Buddha above the void descended slowly and came before everyone. Let's talk. Tongtian Buddha put away the thousand treasures Xianxia surrounding the Qixin temple and smiled faintly. Talk. Daogong also squinted his eyes. Yes, talk. Tongtian Buddha's voice was firm. Jin Wuyang stood at the outermost periphery. Talk? If there was something to talk about, these old folks wouldn't be dead. Even if they wanted to talk and settle things, they wouldn't talk to him. The grudges were too deep. There was no room for negotiation anymore. State your conditions, Daogong said casually. At this moment, with the reversal of the offensive, the negotiating power was in his hands. Although Luya was the strongest force and the Tao ancestor of this realm, the emperors in the Qixin temple had pushed Daogong forward to represent them. Now, Luya could only stand aside and let Daogong negotiate. Tongtian Buddha glanced at Jin Wuyang in the distance and then looked at Donglin. Let's deal with him first. Tongtian Buddha's face carried a smile, and he pointed lightly. Emperor Donglin's face turned pale, and then he became furious. Tongtian, have you gone mad? Are you teaming up with them to attack me? Even in the distance, Jin Wuyang was stunned. He thought, what is Tongtian up to? The pointed finger of the Tongtian Buddha sent shivers down the spine of Emperor Donglin. At this point, there were 3 pairs of second-tier emperors left on the battlefield. Even if they were defeated, they could still retreat safely. Those emperors would die, but he would survive, and that wouldn't be a big problem for him. But now, with the move made by the Tongtian Buddha, his life was also at stake. Tongtian, have you gone mad? Cooperating with them? Emperor Donglin was beginning to panic. He was the ruler of a high-grade world. Although he had avatars, the one that had come to the great desolate wilderness this time was his strongest battle avatar. Possessed invaluable treasures. If this avatar fell here, along with the lost emperors, it would be difficult for their Donglin realm to stand in the surrounding domains. Donglin, you used the names of protecting those emperors to kill Dongyan. I have to avenge this great enmity. Tongtian Buddha revealed a rare, ferocious expression. Dongyan was an emperor of my 3,000 worlds and also the Tao ancestor of the Dongyan realm. Now he followed me to the great desolate wilderness seeking opportunities, but he was killed by you. How can I explain if I let you go back? The murderous intent in the eyes of Tongtian Buddha grew stronger. Luya watched everything and pondered on countermeasures. He couldn't guarantee that everything Tongtian said was true. Dongyan's death was indeed related to Donglin, but Tongtian didn't come to rescue at a critical moment either. In his view, the Tongtian Buddha was just a paper tiger. He was trying to weaken the forces on the battlefield by utilizing their strength. If they were defeated, they would probably be the ones surrounded now. What? Aren't you planning to take action? Tongtian hesitated. In this situation, if they didn't support him, Luya and Daogong wouldn't support him either. After all, they had come for the Qixin temple. If they could kill a fourth-tier emperor now, it might intimidate many small fries. After all, there was currently only one fifth-tier emperor in the original universe. The ancient god clan was very far from the great desolate wilderness. Even if they used their treasures to teleport multiple times, it would still take a long time. Most of the ones who could arrive here were nearby emperors and grand Yen immortals. Deal with these people first, let the Death Spirit Array formation absorb the Death Qi and reach a perfect state. By then, with the power of the Qixin Temple and the blessing of the Great Desolate Tao, even if a fifth-tier emperor came, they could still contend. Daogong first glanced at Jin Wuyang in the distance and then nodded to Luya. Take action. Boom! Daogong took the lead, and his dust whisk instantly covered the sky, leaving no place for Emperor Donglin to escape. L will stop Jin Wuyang. You two quickly kill Donglin's avatar. Fourth-tier emperors on the battlefield were all at a similar level except for Daogong, who was slightly weaker. The other emperors were all at the normal level of a fourth tier, especially Tongtian Buddha. He inherited the origin of the high-grade world. Although his Tao was only of a medium world, the origin of the high-grade world still made his Tao immensely powerful. Tongtian, you shameless scoundrel! Emperor Donglin had no way to escape. Facing Luya and Tongtian Buddha, two powerful fourth-tier emperors, his divine body was quickly defeated, and his battle armor was torn apart by Luya's hand. In the distance, Daogong suppressed the void while blocking Jin Wuyang's way. Jin Wuyang, don't worry. It will be your turn soon. Daogong sneered. When Tongtian Buddha negotiated with them, he secretly conveyed to them that as long as they joined forces to kill Donglin, he would help them deal with Jin Wuyang together. This was also the reason why they cooperated with Tongtian Buddha. Even if Tongtian Buddha played any tricks, their combat power on the battlefield was not weaker than his. Moreover, in the current situation, Donglin was not far from death. As long as they killed Donglin, even if Tongtian changed his mind, they could still use the Qixin Temple to restrain him. Luya and him could then besiege Jin Wuyang and take revenge for the grudges of the past. Daogong, you are as foolish as before? Jin Wuyang sneered. In the distant void, Emperor Donglin, unable to endure the humiliation, directly detonated his terrifying avatar. Reni's self-destruction of a Tortenler emperor was extremely terrifying. Endless white chi waves rolled, and even a third-tier emperor falling into it would be instantly strangled. As a fourth-tier emperor, Luya relied on the Tao of the great desolate wilderness. The Death Spirit Array could reach the threshold of a powerful fourth tier. However, he dared not resist it head-on and quickly retreated backward. Tongtian, it's time to close the net. Jin Wuyang's eyes were cold, and his aura surged into the sky. Tongtian Buddha was protected by the 1,000 treasures Kasaya, and his body was unharmed. After hearing Jin Wuyang's message, he sighed and said, "Virtuous." In the vast emptiness, billions of miles away from the battlefield, Two figures, Hu Qing and Jian Wushuang, were conversing with Grand Yen Immortal from the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm. Suddenly, a terrifying aura emanated from the distant Qishan temple. Boom! A shockwave rolled through, shattering the void in the core region of the great desolate wilderness, leaving numerous horrifying spatial fissures that took a long time to heal. "This is the effects of emperors fighting?" Jian Wushuang exclaimed, shocked. Even from billions of miles away, that aura managed to inflict wounds on their bodies. Fortunately, everyone present was at least a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Both Jian Wushuang and Hu Qing were ultimate beings in their paths, and their strength not inferior to 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals. They could withstand the fluctuations of this aura. "It's too terrifying," exclaimed a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal from the Danajayan realm. Originally, they had followed Emperor's guidance into the depths of the great desolate wilderness in search of the opportunity to become an emperor. They were excited and looking forward to the chances within the Qishan temple. Now, feeling the fluctuations in that aura, they all had a bad premonition. Indeed, the opportunity to allow a Grand Yen Immortal to ascend to emperor is not that simple. "What's the matter, Brother Jiuyu? Are you scared?" spoke the first prince from the Dongyan realm. He was a perfected 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, ranking among the top in this group of Grand Yen Immortals. Besides a few emperors, his position was the highest in the Dongyan realm, making him the most hopeful genius to become an emperor in the Dongyan realm's countless years. His Dao was still a 3rd-grade Dao. As long as he successfully merged his Daos, he would have the power of a 2nd-tier emperor. In the current 3,000 great worlds, there were still many worlds without owners. As a native practitioner, after becoming an emperor, he could naturally control a world. At that time, with his own Taoist arena and his comprehension of the heavenly Tao, he could quickly become a 3rd-tier emperor, leaping to become one of the peak powers in the universe. "If I were afraid, I wouldn't have come." Jiuyu's eyes were cold, murmuring softly. His appearance was somewhat similar to the pale monk that Jian Wushuang had met before, but their strengths were worlds apart. When they had just encountered this group, the young Samanera had secretly transmitted to him, warning him not to provoke the chief disciple of the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm, Jiuyu. This chief disciple, who resided on Tongtian Mountain, had achieved the perfect 9 revolutions stage countless years ago. It was said that he had comprehended 9 great Daos, each reaching the level of perfection in the 9 revolutions stage. He had been suppressing his strength and refraining from merging his Daos. It was rumored that he had cultivated some special secret technique. Once the technique was perfected, he could merge his Daos. As long as he succeeded in merging his Daos, his Dao would be comparable to the ultimate Dao. Drip, drip. The crisp sound of raindrops gradually echoed. The raindrops grew denser, transitioning from a drizzle to a downpour. For a moment, the entire great desolate wilderness was enveloped in heavy rain, puzzling some emperors and Grand Yen Immortals on the periphery. "Isn't this the great desolate wilderness? How can it rain here?" a woman in gray exclaimed in surprise. Jian Wushuang and others looked up at the sky. "The rainwater is golden," many exclaimed. "Could it be?" Jian Wushuang caught a raindrop in his hand, his eyes flickering slightly. He saw a shattered Grand Dao within the raindrop. Manipulating the rain around him with yen power, he instantly gathered a large droplet. Studying it closely, he still saw the broken Grand Dao within the rainwater. Seeing Jian Wushuang's reaction, others turned curiously. "Wushuang, did you find something?" the gray-clad woman inquired. "This is Emperor's Fall." Jiuyu, a Yen immortal who had lived through countless chaotic eras, spoke. He took a clump of rainwater, forming a seal with his hands. The shattered Grand Dao within the rainwater was peeled off by him, astonishing the onlookers. "Master Jiuyu is right. This is Emperor's Fall. Only when an emperor dies does a world experience golden rain," Jian Wushuang said, filled with emotion. He had read about this in an ancient script before. In the endless epochs of the Great Sea region, the last emperor's fall occurred during the era when Jin Wuyang killed dozens of emperors, causing the region to be shrouded in golden rain. However, the reign described in that record was not as immense as this one. This indicated that more emperors had fallen in the great desolate wilderness this time, surpassing the number slain by Zhen Wuyang during the ancient era or even rivaling that of a top-tier emperor's fall. Wu Shuang truly has broad knowledge. Indeed, this is Emperor's Fall. I was fortunate enough to witness it during the ancient era in your Great Sea region. Jiuyu sighed, vividly recalling the scene from the last Emperor's Fall. At that time, he was already a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, and today he remained one. However, he became more convinced of his own great Tao. Weakness led to being slaughtered, turned into rainwater, but only strength could ensure eternal existence. He didn't care about those emperors with 5th or 4th tier Tao, not even paying attention to those with 3rd grade Tao. He had gained fame early on. Among the outstanding talents of his time who had become emperors, they were all ordinary, far from being considered strong among emperors. He was the strongest among his peers in the heaven-reaching Buddha realm from his youth. It wasn't until he encountered the Tianji from the Dongyan realm in the Grand Yen Immortal stage that he understood the gap in their great Taos. At that time, he was a 3rd grade Tao 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal encountering Tianji, who was a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal at the time, who was pursuing the ultimate Tao. The two of them, one from the awe-inspiring talents of the heaven-reaching Buddha realm, the other the strongest prince of the Dongyan realm, engaged in a battle witnessed even by the emperor himself. Taoist Tianji, a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, faced off against the 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, Jiuyu. In the end, their battle concluded in a draw. 3 revolutions against 9 revolutions, and it ended in a draw. This result was unbearable for the proud Jiuyu. When he achieved the perfected 9 revolution stage, he challenged Taoist Tianji again. In this battle, he was at his peak of the 9 revolutions, and the Tianji was also at the 9 revolution stage. This time, there was no draw. He was thoroughly defeated. Taoist Tianji defeated him with just one move. From then on, he started to accumulate strength, spending years on Mount Tongtian comprehending the ancient civilization's secret techniques. The unity of myriad Das, Jiuyu murmured to himself. The ultimate Tao couldn't be comprehended through enlightenment alone. According to the Tongtian Buddha, he didn't have the destiny for it. Later, unable to watch him fall forever, Tongtian Buddha bestowed upon him the secret technique of the unity of myriad Taos. Upon walking the path of the unity of myriad Taos, he realized the feeling of power that surpassed the strength of countless peers. He could sense that this Tao was no worse than the ultimate Tao, but succeeding in it was even more challenging than the ultimate Tao. Up to now, no one within the original universe had become an emperor through the unity of myriad Taos. Perhaps only a few people had obtained this secret technique, or perhaps this path was fundamentally impossible to succeed in. However, even if no one had succeeded, he would continue on this path. Even if he couldn't become an emperor, he refused to be an ordinary one. So, emperors can be defeated. The woman in gray looked at the golden rain in the sky, her eyes filled with astonishment. She was just an ordinary 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, walking a path that was only a 4th grade Great Tao. In her view, as long as someone was an emperor, they were the supreme existence. Now it seemed that her perspective was limited. Many people gained profound insights from the golden rain, especially from the broken Great Tao within it, which greatly aided their cultivation. This trip was not in vain. Outside the edge of the great desolate wilderness, a group from the great dream realm stopped in their tracks. Ancestor, what is this golden rain? Is it unique to the great desolate wilderness? A young girl from the great dream clan asked in amazement as she bathed in the rain. Apart from a few emperors who knew the truth, other Grand Yen Immortals had no idea what was happening. After all, emperors falling was an extremely rare sight. Some emperors had never witnessed the scene of an emperor's fall until they were killed themselves. This is Emperor's Fall. The ancestor of the great dream realm looked towards the depths of the great desolate wilderness. He could sense a terrifying battle happening there. Even he might fall in such a battle. Outside the great desolate, various forces had gathered, but upon seeing this emperor's fall, they all came to a halt. Even the 4th-tier emperors dared not make a move. Gradually, various forces began to gather and formed a temporary alliance. The purpose of this alliance was twofold. First, the Xianxia temple, which was the goal of many people present, and second, to counter the ancient god clan and other peak forces. In the original universe, the 5 peak forces were all overseen by 5th-tier emperors. Even though the true bodies of these 5th-tier emperors had gone to the River of Time, they still possessed the combat power of 5th-tier thresholds through their avatars. This level of power was something these people couldn't contend with. Moreover, the 5th-tier emperors who had gone to the River of Time were now rushing back. If they didn't unite, they wouldn't gain any benefits from the Xianxia temple. The purpose of the temporary alliance was to huddle together for warmth, to resist the 5th-tier emperors, and then get a share of the spoils. In 3 days, most of the forces in the East Domain, where the Great Sea region was located, had gathered. Even the most powerful force in the East Domain, the Eternal Tower, had finally arrived. The Eternal Tower was a peak force in the original universe, built from several high-grade worlds. Now, the ruler of the Eternal Tower was the direct disciple of the 5th-tier emperor, Emperor Zhutian. Her name was Fengyu. She was incredibly strong, and she had several 4th-tier emperors under her command. If a 5th-tier emperor didn't show himself, she was one of the most influential figures in the entire original universe. Emperor Zhutian had long achieved the 5th tier as an emperor, emerging from the original universe and venturing into the River of Time within the space-time continuum. Now, with the emergence of the Xianxia temple, the controller of the Eternal Tower immediately informed his master. However, even a 5th-tier emperor would require 1,000,000 years to return from the River of Time to the original universe. They had no choice but to let them explore the Xianxia temple first. Demon Lord Fengyu. Inside the temporary headquarters of the Alliance, a terrifying old man appeared outside the Eternal Tower with just a flicker of his figure. The name Eternal Tower came from the magnificent Divine Tower before the old man. This was the eternal treasure that Emperor Zhutian obtained from the River of Time, a creation of the mythical Universe Master. Even a 5th-tier emperor would covet such a treasure because it was crafted by the Universe Master, containing the great Tao of the universe within. It allowed one to comprehend their own great Tao and suppress all things. The tower had 9 levels, and only a 4th-tier emperor like Emperor Zhutian could fully unleash the power of the Eternal Tower. Qishui, are you going to be an enemy of our Eternal Tower? Inside the 8th level of the Eternal Tower, Ruler Fengyu shouted angrily. Fengyu was dressed in a long green robe. She was one of the few female emperors among the 4th-tier emperors. Her delicate face frequently changed, and even the weaker emperors couldn't see her true appearance clearly. I have no choice. A group of little fellows has caught the old man's attention and insisted on dragging me into their affairs. So, the old man had to step forward, Wanderer Qishui said with a faint smile. He was originally a lone traveler from the Eastern Domain. His homeland world had long been destroyed, but he had mastered a secret realm. Although he hadn't mastered a domain, his strength was that of a genuine 4th-tier top emperor. Oh, since that's the case, then you're going to be our enemy. The expression on Demon Lord Fengyu's face gradually turned cold. She earned her title of Demon Lord through ruthless means, capitalizing on her brutal tactics. When the emperors of the Eastern Domain had risen like mushrooms after the rain, she had started looking for high-grade worlds everywhere, trying to seize control opportunistically. One 4th-tier emperor who had achieved mastery in the 2nd-grade Tao directly took control of a high-grade world within the scope of the Eternal Tower's influence and even killed the guardians of the Eternal Tower in that area. In that era, 5th-tier emperors entered the River of Time one after another. The peak forces were momentarily without the presence of these 5th-tier emperors. Many powerful rulers and emperors began to detach themselves from the Eternal Tower. At that time, Demon Lord Fengyu was just a ruler of a high-grade world, his strength merely ordinary among the 4th tier. Many of the strong individuals within the Eternal Tower were not convinced. However, due to her status as the direct disciple of Emperor Zhutian, some people, while not daring to rebel openly, secretly refused to obey her commands. Without the direct suppression of 5th-tier emperors, the peak forces were on the verge of collapse. Both internal pressure and external threats required her strength to be validated. Coincidentally, a top third-tier emperor appeared, giving her a target to establish her dominance. This third-tier emperor first killed the second-tier emperor guarding the higher world and then took control of the higher world himself. Although many emperors emerged during that era, there were still very few who could successfully reach the second tier through the harmony of their Tao. Therefore, many higher worlds remained ownerless. As a peak force, the Eternal Tower naturally saw the potential in these higher worlds. They took control of several surrounding higher worlds and planned to have emperors from their own faction govern these worlds in the future. This third-tier emperor was extremely arrogant. After taking control of the higher world, he directly advanced to the fourth-tier emperor, becoming a ruler. He thought little of Demon Lord Fengyu and began to provoke the Eternal Tower. In his Tao arena, the fourth-tier emperor who ruled the higher world was considered the ceiling of power at that time. Even within the Eternal Tower, there were only 3 rulers. However, Demon Lord Fengyu managed to manipulate the Eternal Tower and enter that higher world. No one knew what happened inside, but when the Demon Lord Fengyu came out, the higher world had already become a ruin. One higher world had been destroyed like this. Since that incident, no one in the Eternal Tower dared to act recklessly, and the Fengyu became the Demon Lord Fengyu. In the chaotic era of the Eastern Domain, the number of emperors who died at her hands was in the double digits. In contrast, the wanderer Qishui was a lone wanderer. From the chaotic era of the Eastern Domain to the present, he had no remarkable achievements to speak of. Although his personal strength had reached the peak of the fourth tier, his prestige and fame were not significant. He was known for his sneak attacks and had nothing much to show for himself. He had no attachments, controlling only a few hundred special beings within his territory, and he had no relatives. Therefore, he lived aimlessly, as long as he was happy. He had many enemies, but most wouldn't seek revenge against him. After all, they didn't fear the person with nothing to lose. Even some super forces that suffered losses at his hands could only swallow their grievances. However, this time, the Qishui became the leader of a temporary alliance and directly challenged the peak power, surprising Demon Lord Fengyu. Wanderer Qishui was barefoot and dressed in tattered robes, resembling an old beggar. But no one dared to underestimate his strength. Fengyu, don't speak so definitively. The appearance of the Qishan Temple is the bestowal of the supreme rules. No one can monopolize it, not even a fifth-tier emperor. Qishui changed his usual demeanor and became serious. Inside the Eternal Tower, the Demon Lord Fengyu stood by the tower window, looking at the defiant Qishui standing in the void, her brows furrowed. This old thing, Qishui, a third-tier emperor, was infuriated. They were the closest among the peak forces. This time, the opportunity from the Qishan Temple was most likely to fall into their hands. At this moment, a sudden temporary alliance had emerged, gathering half of the super-strong individuals in the Eastern Domain. Even though they were peak forces, until the return of the fifth-tier emperors, they wouldn't gain any advantage within this temporary alliance. During the chaotic era, this old fellow wandered alone, stirring up many wars. Now, some people actually believe him. Do you think those people are fools? They are just using each other. The temporary alliance gathered half of the strong individuals in the Eastern Domain. Each of them was shrewd. There were more than 10 fourth-tier emperors among them. With so many strong individuals, they elected the wanderer Qishui as their leader, obviously fearing being implicated once the fifth-tier emperors returned. Qishui was different. He was a lone wanderer. Even if the fifth-tier emperors returned, he could just pull up his pants and run away. He didn't need any territory. He could thrive in any universe. Forget it. For now, let's prioritize the Qishan Temple. If we delay any longer, the strong individuals from the other factions will join forces against us, which will be even more disadvantageous for us. Demon Lord Fengyu made up her mind and appeared outside the Eternal Tower with a flash. Inside the tower, no one dared to say more. Demon Lord Fengyu was no longer the little girl who used to live under her master's shadow. Qishui, I don't want to go to war with you. Those who are sensible step aside. Let's explore together. The numerous powerful beings in the temporary alliance were closely monitoring the negotiations. If they didn't unite, Demon Lord Fengyu wouldn't care about them. It was possible that the Eternal Tower would directly seal off the great desolate wilderness, preventing them from entering. After a brief conversation between the two Tier 4 experts, they each returned to their respective camps. Brother Qishui, what's the situation? Did Demon Lord Fengyu agree? Many emperors inquired. After all, this opportunity surpassed everything else. In times of chaos, the struggle was for territory. Now, it was about the chance to ascend as the Lord of the Universe. If one truly became the Lord of the Universe and controlled the original universe, they would be invincible not just in the original universe but also in the long river of time and space. Friends, Fengyu has agreed. We will explore the Qixin Temple together. And as for the opportunity, it's every man for himself. Qishui smiled. Upon hearing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They were afraid of a direct confrontation with the Eternal Tower. Fortunately, Brother Qishui spoke for us. Otherwise, Demon Lord Fengyu would not have allowed us to explore the Qixin Temple together, the people remarked. With their goals achieved, Qishui, as the apparent leader, received numerous compliments. Everyone, let's set off now and enter the great desolate wilderness. Wanderer Qishui waved his hand, and a massive palace rose from the ground, appearing behind him. This palace was an ordinary supreme treasure palace, conducive to gathering everyone in one place. It wasn't that they didn't have more powerful palaces, but no one dared to rashly enter someone else's supreme treasure palace. If they inadvertently triggered the supreme treasure's power and got suppressed, it would be a big joke. If they split up, it would seem disorganized. Walker, understanding them best, proactively brought out an ordinary supreme treasure palace. Even a Tier 1 emperor could easily break the palace's defenses, but it allowed everyone to gather together, appearing as a unified force. However, this palace also had its drawback. It wasn't fast enough. The massive palace could only follow behind the Eternal Tower. As numerous powerful beings from the Eastern Domain entered the great desolate wilderness together, they felt an overwhelming desolation, even a chill. The void, purified by the baptism of the Emperor's fall, bred countless sprites, forming many unconscious ghosts and monsters. These creatures weren't very strong, mostly at the Grand Yen Immortal level. How many emperors had to die for so many stray thoughts to appear? Qishui controlled the palace, standing at the highest point, looking at the ghosts and monsters formed by these stray thoughts. He had survived from the chaotic era until now and had witnessed many grand scenes. However, just as the Qixin Temple emerged, they had just gathered, not even starting to explore it when a terrifying battle occurred inside. It seemed like quite a few emperors had died. If all the emperors from the original universe were to come to this great desolate wilderness, how many of them would die? Brother Qishui just got the news. All the emperors from the Donglin realm were wiped out. Even the main battle avatar of the Emperor Donglin fell. Oh, and also, Feng Mo was severely injured by Yuan Dun and was killed by a mysterious person. Feng Mo? Qishui recalled this person and said, remember this kid had just broken through the tier for not long ago and didn't have an avatar. Yes, this time he truly perished. Because his world was too deeply fused with his Tao. It directly collapsed, and countless lives perished. In the pursuit of opportunities, everyone only thought about benefits. No one ever considered what the consequences of failure might be. When the world collapsed, countless tribesmen all perished. This was the fate of the losers. Although the opportunity of the Qixin Temple was great, how many could truly succeed in the end? One person's success came at the cost of the bones of tens of thousands. No matter who this phrase was applied to, it was the most accurate, especially for a strong person. The success of a strong person would undoubtedly lead to many failures. These emperors, which one of them hadn't walked out from piles of corpses and seas of blood, they understood this principle better than anyone. But after tasting the benefits brought by strength, their desire for strength became even stronger. They became the Tao ancestors' desire to become a ruler. After becoming a ruler, they would recruit people and build forces everywhere. Forming a group was just an external statement. Taking what they needed was the real deal. Now there was a chance to ascend in one step. How could they not go all out to seize it? The powerful figures from both sides scanned the great desolate wilderness, their hearts filled with mixed feelings. After the emperor's fall, Jian Wushuang encountered a big problem on his side. Although those sprites were only at the Grand Yen Immortal level, there were just too many of them. Among them, there were many perfected Grand Yen Immortals. Everyone protect Wushuang and Hu Qing. I have informed Lord Buddha, and there will be emperors coming to rescue us. Zhou Yu was the strongest among them in strength and seniority. He directly ordered everyone to set up a simple formation to resist those ghosts and monsters. Countless sprites crawled out from the cracks in space. Their bodies twisted, shaped like little ghosts, draped in illusory robes, wandering in the void. Once they encountered cultivators, they surged towards them. Everyone present at least had the cultivation level of a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, totaling over 1,000 people. Half of the elites from the 3,000 worlds were here. Each of them was stronger than the elders of the Great Sea region, except for Jin Wuyang. Brother Wushuang, follow me. The woman in gray clothes waved her hand. They only knew that Jian Wushuang was from the Great Sea region. He had rescued the little monk Hu Qing midway, and the emperors had ordered them to take care of these two especially, protecting Hu Qing in particular. However, Hu Qing was a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal but had been saved by Jian Wushuang, a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. This puzzled them, but they didn't dare to ask. After all, he had saved the people of their 3,000 worlds. Jian Wushuang found it somewhat amusing. This woman in gray clothes in front of him was just a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, yet she actively wanted to protect him. However, he couldn't refuse other people's kindness. He nodded and stood behind the woman in gray clothes. I'll have to trouble you later, friend Luo Shui. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and then stepped back behind Luo Shui. Luo Shui was an elite from the Donglin realm and also an elder in the sect. Despite her young age, she had only practiced for 60 million years, which, for many 9th transformation Grand Yen Immortals, was merely a simple closed-door cultivation. Jian Wushuang stood behind a woman. Even if other Grand Yen Immortals were polite, some of their actions still showed disdain. However, he didn't care about all this. As long as there was a chance, he planned to slip away and leave the great desolate wilderness as soon as possible. He had a premonition that if he didn't leave now, he might not be able to leave later. After taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang carefully examined Fairy Luo Shui in front of him. From her back, Fairy Luo Shui had a graceful figure. However, her gray linen robe was too loose to discern her shape clearly. Only her white neck and some stray strands of hair that hadn't been tied up indicated that Luo Shui was undoubtedly a rare beauty. Too bad. Jian Wushuang shook his head silently. If these people didn't leave, most of them would die here. This kind-hearted fairy, Luo Shui, was mediocre in strength, even inferior to Gu Yuan, making her the weakest among them. That's why she was left with Jian Wushuang. The young monk, Hu Qing, glanced at Jian Wushuang, smiled slightly, and nodded. Since he stepped onto the path, Jian Wushuang felt that Hu Qing had changed a lot. Personality, mindset, and power had undergone a drastic transformation. He kept his killing intent hidden and his guard up. Looking back at the scene when Hu Qing's power surged, Jian Wushuang could hardly believe it. If people could tap into their potential in dangerous situations, boosting their strength by 30 or 50%, or even directly breaking through their original boundaries, just like his sudden promotion to Grand Yen Immortal, it could explain this. Hu Qing's original strength was at best that of an ordinary Yen Immortal. Jumping from an ordinary Yen Immortal to a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal was astounding. Jian Wushuang hadn't even dared to think about such a significant temporary breakthrough. Initially, he thought the disturbance in the great desolate wilderness was because of him. Now, it seemed like Hu Qing was more of a protagonist. There were too many secrets behind all this. The sudden fall of the emperor and the terrifying white aura. It indicated that Jin Wuyang, Tongtian Buddha, and other emperors had clashed with the resurrected beings. Who won and who fell remained unknown. At this level of conflict, they were utterly powerless. Staying in the great desolate wilderness was a burden. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes slowly. Regardless, recovering his strength was crucial now. While he leisurely restored his heart and thought power, outside the crowd, Zhou and others fought desperately against the sprites. It was impossible. Their numbers were overwhelming. Just as they killed one batch, another crawled out from the cracks. Brother Zhou, this won't work at all. Yeah. There are too many of these monsters. We can't possibly kill them all. Initially, they handled the situation with ease, but these monsters lacked consciousness, were fearless of death, and were exceptionally powerful. Some even possessed the strength of a 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. After Zhou eliminated several 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal level monsters nearby, he glanced around and felt a sinking feeling in his heart. Not good. Meanwhile, on the other side of the great desolate wilderness, the makeshift alliance of Qishui and the Eternal Tower was surprisingly relaxed. With numerous Emperor-level experts clearing the way, they didn't need the Grand Yen Immortals to fight desperately. This great desolate wilderness is so dangerous. A girl from the Great Dream Realm leaned on the corridor of the palace, watching the monsters shattered by the aura of emperors. You girl, if it weren't for the ancestor, facing so many monsters, not to mention finding the Qishan temple, it would be incredibly difficult just to survive in this place. A middle-aged Grand Yen Immortal furrowed his brows. He didn't know if the ancestors' decision to send them, Grand Yen Immortals who had always lived in the Great Dream Realm, to find the Qishan temple in the Great Desolate Wilderness was right or wrong. In the vast expanse of the Great Desolate Wilderness, whether it was the Grand Yen Immortal or the Emperor, their mental states began to change gradually upon entering the wilderness. In the cracks of the void, a massive black serpent slithered, its head crowned with black horns. Its enormous eyes moved as it continued forward. Not powerful enough. A black smoke suddenly emerged above the serpent's head, dissipating to reveal a middle-aged Taoist standing there. He wore a mottled white Taoist robe, a tall crown on his head, and a purple eye in the center of his forehead. He had been observing from afar when the great desolate wilderness first stirred, but at that time he was not present in this universe. Are the chosen ones also weak? All 18 divine generals were killed, and the strongest among them was only a 4th-tier emperor. The dignity of our temple has been completely trampled by this group, the middle-aged Taoist murmured while standing on the serpent's head. Black Chi Snake, your heart power is becoming more interesting. The middle-aged Taoist touched the serpent's horn, and the purple eye in his forehead kept turning. Now that you're awake, why not come out and see me? The middle-aged Taoist shouted angrily at a dark corner in the void. In the pitch-black corner, silence reigned. After the middle-aged Taoist's voice fell, an old hunchbacked man emerged, holding a dim lamp. I am the servant of the old master, not yours. You should be clear about that. The hunchbacked old man, holding the dim lamp, staggered to the middle-aged Taoist. This exchange revealed many secrets. Unfortunately, in this narrow space, there were only these two. Even a 5th-tier emperor couldn't hide from them. You, this dog servant, secretly revived the temple, and I thought you could make those useless people take a few steps forward. Yet, as soon as they were revived, most of them died. The middle-aged Taoist sneered at the hunchbacked old man. He had drifted with the Qishan temple from the river of time to the original universe. At that time, he was severely injured and had been accumulating in the cracks of the void until now, and his injuries still hadn't fully healed. Originally, he had wanted those divine generals to inherit the Tao of the Qishan temple, to gain some benefits from the temple, and then step forward himself, killing those inheritors and seizing the treasures. But these people turned out to be worthless. Even after all these cycles, not a single one had reached the level of a 5th-tier emperor. Enough of the nonsense. I am the only living disciple of the Qishan temple. His treasures should belong to me. Tell me, how many treasures did you get from the inner hall? I don't need too much, just enough to restore my strength. The middle-aged Taoist said coldly, his selfishness and greed emanating from him, utterly domineering and leaving no face for the hunchbacked old man. Wuxia, I'm not here to give you treasures. I'm here to inform you that you've been expelled from the Qishan temple. The hunchbacked old man said slowly, his expression unchanged. Expelled? You're not even qualified to remove my name. You're just a spirit-keeping slave. Wuxia, the middle-aged Taoist, couldn't help but roar. Wuxia had a premonition of what was coming but still couldn't believe it. After all, he had nothing left now. If the Qixin temple expelled him, how could he gain any benefits? The calm on the hunchbacked old man's face gradually disappeared, replaced by a lifeless aura. This aura made even the deeply engraved wrinkles on his face tremble slightly. For a moment, Wuxia involuntarily took a step back. I might not have the authority to expel you, but the true spirits in the Qixin temple do. The hunchbacked old man's voice was icy, like a sharp blade in the cold wind, piercing into Wuxia's chest, one after another. Upon hearing the words true spirit, Wuxia froze. Then he exclaimed in disbelief, "How is it possible? The true spirit's injuries were even more severe than mine. How could it awaken? I've delivered the message, you don't have the qualifications to know the rest," the hunchbacked old man said, his voice fading as he slowly retreated into the corner. As he was leaving, the hunchbacked old man seemed to remember something. "Oh, right. The true spirit mentioned that, out of respect for the old master, it will give you another chance. You can undergo the trial at the Qixin temple along with other practitioners." After leaving these words behind, the hunchbacked old man vanished completely into the void. Undergo the trial together. Wuxia's expression changed. He used to be a registered disciple of the Qixin temple and was very familiar with their trials. The Qixin temple's trials weren't about gaining benefits based on your strength. The requirements were high, and they demanded exceptional potential. At his peak, he had touched the threshold of the 6th tier. But now, with his divine body still injured, he was only at the top 5th tier level. Despite his arrogance, he knew he had no more potential left. In ancient times, as a disciple of the Qixin temple, he had heard the legendary Qixin, a starry overlord, discuss the Tao. Despite that, his power remained at the 5th tier emperor level. His Tao was extraordinary, a unique second-grade Tao that merged two ordinary second-grade Taos. He had the potential to reach the top, but he remained stuck at the 5th tier emperor. He had comprehended the 6th tier rules with the help of the Qixin but struggled to control them. After the Qixin fell and the starry sky fell silent, his strength was unremarkable among the Qixin's disciples. He was just a named disciple who survived that calamity and followed the Qixin temple to the original universe. "This is good. Saves me from using those wastrels," Wuxia said, his face twisted with malice. With his strength, he feared no one in the original universe. Regarding talent and potential, apart from the ultimate emperor, he doubted anyone could surpass him. After all, ultimate emperors were rare. In ancient times, their status was high. Even the Qixin favored them. Most of the ultimate emperors who appeared in the River of Time's many universes bowed under the Qixin's command. But these people had all perished. Even the powerful 3 god lords, who controlled a side of the universe, had disappeared. Whoosh! Wuxia tore through the void, no longer hiding, heading directly toward the Qixin temple. The true spirit's awakening marked the beginning of the Qixin temple's real trial. As for the inheritance the Great Sea region received from the ancient era, it was just an ordinary inheritance from the external hall. At that time, the true spirit hadn't revived, so the treasures they received were limited. But now, with the true spirit's revival and the opening of the internal hall, the true inheritance of the Qixin temple began. Countless treasures, powerful legacies. The Qixin had collected treasures from endless ages, all within the inner hall. Outside the Qixin temple at this moment, a towering tower came to a slow stop. It was the Eternal Tower entering the great desolate wilderness. The two were similar in size, but their auras were vastly different. The Eternal Tower was like a battleship in the vast ocean, immense and overpowering, exuding an aura of conquering the entire sea. In contrast, the Qixin temple's aura was like the entire great desolate wilderness, encompassing all things. As for the temporary alliance formed by Qixue, it was like a sea turtle, following the battleship, wandering in the vast ocean. These people move quite fast. Tongtian Buddha, sitting in meditation in the void, glanced indifferently at the Hall of the Eternal Tower and the Qishui Alliance. The eyes of Luya were bloodshot, completely ignoring Tongtian Buddha. Recalling the battle just now, he felt somewhat bewildered now. At first, Tongtian Buddha collaborated with them to suppress the Eastern Forest God Emperor. Everything went smoothly. Zhen Wuyang, constrained by Daogong, couldn't make a move. Together with Tongtian Buddha and the emperors of the Qishan Temple, they forced the Donglin to self-destruct. But just when he thought the situation was turning, Tongtian Buddha suddenly enveloped the entire Qishan Temple with 1,000 treasures Kasaya and entered the interior of the temple himself. This caught Luya off guard. He was dealing with the terrifying waves of white energy while trying to support the Qishan Temple. The same happened on Daogong's side. Zhen Muyang's sudden burst overwhelmed Daogong, beating them both. After defeating them, Zhen Wuyang followed the 1,000 treasures Kasaya into the Qishan Temple. Later, the aura of the Qishan Temple suddenly surged, followed by the fall of emperors. The changes in the Qishan Temple surprised and worried him and Daogong. After the surge, the Qishan Temple emitted an atmosphere akin to a sacrificial altar, clearly different from before. But they couldn't enter. The entire Qishan Temple was enveloped by the 1,000 treasures Kasaya. While they were anxiously trying to find a way in, Zhen Wuyang and Tongtian were suddenly transported out of the temple. Both had stains of brown blood on them, indicating that everyone inside was likely dead. Without the protection of the Qishan Temple, a group of second- and third-tier emperors against Zhen Wuyang and Tongtian was a slaughter. Although they cultivated the devouring Tao of the Qishan, each of them was exceptionally strong within their tier. However, facing two top fourth-tier emperors, they had no chance. When Tongtian and Zhen Wuyang just left the Qishan Temple, they didn't immediately attack. Instead, they sat cross-legged in the void. This puzzled Luya and Daogong greatly, but they couldn't beat them, so they could only stand in a standoff. "You took quite a while to arrive," Zhen Wuyang said impatiently. After entering the hall, they directly killed those emperors. Then, regardless of how they tried to refine the hall forcibly, they found no success, and there were no treasures inside. Just when they were about to forcefully break the sacrificial altar, an ancient aura emanated, condensing a powerful spirit. In front of this spirit, they couldn't move. Then, everything went black and they were transported out of the Qishan Temple. However, the spirit left them with a sentence. The trial was about to begin, and they should await the arrival of others. It seemed like they were here to wait for these people. He was well aware of the Eternal Tower's peak power. As for the so-called Qishui Alliance, apart from Qishui, he didn't recognize most of the other emperors. But it seemed like most of the strong figures from the eastern domain of the original universe had arrived. Humph! The Eternal Tower descended slowly and landed on the Immortal Bone Road. Numerous emperors inside jumped out. "You are Zhen Wuyang, the Great Sea Region's emperor?" Feng Yu scanned the Qishan Temple with her eyes, then asked, her tone exceptionally domineering. Before coming here, she had gathered information about the Great Desolate Wilderness. This place was considered Zhen Wuyang's territory, and the Qishan Temple initially appeared in the Great Sea region. The news had been spread by Zhen Wuyang himself. Now that she had arrived, she naturally asked Zhen Wuyang first. "That's correct." Zhen Wuyang stood up slowly, retracting his sharp aura, and replied calmly. Demon Lord Feng Yu's reputation, he had learned about after becoming an emperor. She was apprenticed to the fifth-tier Emperor Zhutian, controlling the Eternal Tower, the number 1 power in the Eastern Domain. If he were to use the power of the Eternal Tower, Demon Lord Feng Yu's strength would have reached the threshold of the 5th tier, far surpassing everyone present. All the powerful beings in the vicinity of the Great Si region had once thought that Emperor Donglin was the strongest, followed by the Tongtian Buddha, Feng Mo, and himself. However, after this battle, both he and Tongtian Buddha had reached the pinnacle of the 4th tier, stronger than ordinary dominators. Especially Tongtian Buddha's treasured Kasaya had reached the peak treasure level. Few 4th-tier emperors possessed such an item. With this treasure and his own strength, he could easily rank among the top 10 in the Eastern Domain. Not bad in strength. Speak about the Qishan Temple. Feng Yu didn't beat around the bush. He had come a long way. Everything here naturally revolved around the Qixin temple. Without waiting for Zhen Weiyang's response, Tongtian Buddha spoke, "Great Demon Lord Fengyu. Here are two inheritors of the Qixin temple. When we arrived, we confronted them, but unfortunately, their strength wasn't sufficient. We didn't obtain any useful information from them." Tongtian Buddha joined his hands in a harmless gesture, a face that appeared harmless, completely belying the fact that he had recently been on a killing spree, battling Luya and Daogong. Hearing this, Zhen Wuyang didn't know what to say for a moment. He realized the extent of the gap between him and the others. The strategy of attacking Donglin had allowed the Qixin Temple's emperor to lower his guard. Now they had thrown dirt onto Luya and Daogong, a tactic that Zhen Wuyang begrudgingly admitted was quite clever. Zhen Weiyang's face darkened. He glanced at Tongtian Buddha and finally said firmly, "Tongtian is right." Luya and Daogong's faces turned beet red, ready to speak up. However, Qishui, standing in the distance, cast a water spell that made them unable to lift their heads. Yes, their aura matches the one inside the Qixin temple perfectly. "It seems these two are indeed the inheritors," Qishui said, feeling no danger. He appeared in front of Fengyu, grabbing Daogong's neck. "But their strength is too weak, not even reaching the level of a common fourth-tier practitioner." Qishui expressed some disappointment. This was not the powerful inheritance he had imagined. Having been falsely accused by Tongtian and Zhen Wuyang, and further scorned for his weak power, Daogong, once the strongest in comprehending the Qixin Dao, felt his face burn with humiliation. He was infuriated, but his lack of strength was undeniable. If he managed to escape this situation unharmed, he vowed to defend the honor of Qixin Temple and erase the shame of this day. Luya, cunning and deep in strategy, hadn't anticipated encountering a figure even more shameless than Zhen Wuyang, Tongtian Buddha. Nevertheless, this was the great desolate wilderness, Lu Ya's Dao arena. His strength, though barely adequate, reached the top tier here. "Enough! This is my Dao arena. If you want to enter the Qixin temple, go in first and then talk." Initially, he had planned to be domineering, to let these intruders step on his body before entering the Qixin temple. But the fact that Tongtian Buddha and Zhen Wuyang could enter the temple right under his nose drained him of the courage to utter such words. The impressions left by Qishui and Demon Lord Fengyu surpassed even those of Zhen Wuyang and Tongtian Buddha. Either of these two could overpower him, perhaps even lead to his downfall. "Oh, almost forgot about you." Qishui Traveler seized Daogong. As the strongest present, she couldn't afford to leave anyone behind. Buzz! The immensely powerful Eternal Tower instantly shrank to the size of a palm, directly suppressing Luya beneath it. "All right, now talk." Over 100 emperors were present, along with thousands of 9 Revolution's Grand Yen Immortals, many of whom were elites among the Grand Yen Immortals. The weakest among them had crossed the threshold of the 4th grade Dao. Seeing Demon Lord Fengyu and Wanderer Qishui casually suppress a 4th-tier emperor, they displayed unprecedented respect. So, this was the pinnacle of 4th-tier experts? Suppressing an equal-grade opponent effortlessly. There was no need to mention Daogong. He was an emperor who had crossed the 4th-tier threshold. Yet even Luya, who had touched the pinnacle of 4th-tier level, was effortlessly suppressed. The distance between Zhen Wuyang and Tongtian Buddha and the others had gradually narrowed. They were all on the same boat now, despite Zhen Wuyang and Tongtian Buddha being at the peak of the 4th tier. Faced with these two peak 4th-tier emperors, they had little chance of resistance and could only huddle together for warmth. Ever since Tongtian and Zhen Wuyang entered, Daogong and I haven't been able to get in anymore. Even if you kill us, it won't change anything. Luya understood the concept of an irreversible trend. At this point, he chose to yield. He spoke the truth. He was unaware of the changes inside the Qixin temple. Only Tongtian and Zhen Wuyang knew. After the two of them entered the Qixin temple, eminent figures like Fenghua fell one after another, and the entire temple was enveloped in the 1,000 treasures Kasaya, impenetrable. These two individuals had placed all the blame on him, causing him immense distress. Qishui had long attained a level of profound self-awareness, and with just one glance, he could tell it wasn't a lie. But if what Luya said was true, it posed a problem. The treasures were within easy reach, yet he couldn't move an inch himself. The power of the Qixin Temple surpassed any treasure they had ever encountered. Even the combined might of all the emperors present couldn't shake the Qixin Temple in the slightest. It was as if it didn't exist in this void, visible and tangible yet utterly impenetrable. Fengyu, have you informed Emperor Zhu Tian about the matters concerning the Qixin Temple? Qixue, anxious and cornered, could only indirectly inquire of Fengyu, the demon lord. Fengyu might not be aware of what he sought, but her mentor, Emperor Zhu Tian, a fifth-tier emperor who had traveled the river of time for years, undoubtedly possessed far greater knowledge than these emperors who seldom ventured out into the universe. The Qixin Temple's fame resonated widely in the river of time. Numerous legends surrounded it. Some formidable beings even believed that the Qixin Temple had connections with ancient civilizations. In this aspect, it indeed shared similarities. The temple's aura closely resembled that of ancient civilizations. However, the Qixin Temple had only appeared once or twice in the river of time. Each time, it drew innumerable emperors to gather and watch. However, the temple was utterly unreachable. Attempts to suppress or subdue it failed. They couldn't even lay a finger on it. They could only watch helplessly as the Qixin Temple soared into the endless expanse of the cosmos. Qixue, the Wanderer, was vaguely familiar with some of these legends. However, it was his first encounter with the Qixin Temple, especially seeing it standing right there. It didn't appear as if it could move at all. Now, with the confirmation that the inheritor of the Qixin Temple had received teachings within, their chances seemed significant. Moreover, the fifth-tier emperors within the original universe were all within the river of time. He still had a voice now, but if he waited until all the fifth-tier emperors returned, he would merely be trailing behind, devoid of any voice. Don't be fooled by the multitude of forces now aligning with him, forming the Qixue alliance. Once a fifth-tier emperor appeared, these people would scatter faster than birds in flight. Currently, they only sought to vie for power through him. He lacked a clan and faction, but his personal strength was substantial, earning him the admiration of many factions. After all, his individual capability was limited, making him easier to control. If successful, they could let him make the initial choice. In the end, the spoils of war would be divided based on numbers. Most factions within the Qixue alliance shared this mindset. Even if Qixue desired monopoly, they had the strength to resist. Qixue, who was known for his cunning schemes, found himself in a tight spot this time. This was a situation he couldn't outmaneuver. He had to face it head-on. If there wasn't a dominant force at this moment, even if he was a fourth-tier peak emperor, he wouldn't gain much among these many strong contenders. The key was to align with a dominant force to counterbalance other peak forces. He understood this well. It was mutual exploitation between the parties. However, when it came to dividing the treasures at the end, it might spark a massive free-for-all. At that time, there would be no allies. Everyone before him could be slain. In the pitch-black void crevice, Wu's was sat cross-legged atop the head of the black chi snake. This black chi snake was a puppet granted to him by the Qixin when he achieved the sixth-tier emperor status. Unfortunately, it had suffered significant internal damage and lost its former strength. In its peak state, he could have repaired it. However, restoring its sixth-tier power required numerous treasures, especially considering the severe damage to its divine body. These treasures weren't something he could find within the universe. His only hope lay within the Qixin Temple. Being able to participate in this trial was not in vain. Once his power was restored to its peak, few in this river domain could match him. With the Qixin's inheritance, he could aspire to the pinnacle of the universe. Watching the constant quarrels among these native emperors, he found it somewhat amusing. After all, the Qixin Temple was something they could break into, just a bunch of ants. When the Qixin Temple was originally forged, he had witnessed several gods under Qixin destroying an entire universe, extracting its source, and infusing it into the temple. The source of an entire universe, that kind of power was unimaginable. Even the universe masters needed several of them to extract it intact. If destroyed, A single universe master could achieve it. The challenge lay in extracting it intact without damage. The power of the source was the core of the universe, and the core of the Qixin Temple was also a similar source surpassing multiple universes. What the emperors entered was merely an outer hall. There were no valuable treasures inside. The only useful thing was probably its source. There were many outer halls in the Qixin Temple, each containing a miniature source. These source powers were hatched from the core source of the Qixin Temple. Within the source, the Qixin Dao was also contained. To Wuxia, directly cultivating the Qixin Dao was the most foolish method. Moreover, these people claimed to be the 18 divine generals and the 108 envoys, which, in Wuxia's opinion, was incredibly ignorant. The Qixin Temple was indeed guarded by 3 main gods, 18 divine generals, and 108 envoys. However, to obtain their inheritance, one needed the strength of a 5th-tier emperor at the very least. In the present, the divine envoys appointed by these natives were all at the perfected 9 revolutions level, with many even achieving the status of 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals level. They inherited the source contained in the outer hall, arrogantly attempting to grasp the pathways of the major gods and messengers, aiming to reach the pinnacle. It was utterly ridiculous. If one could truly ascend to the universe's peak by merely grasping the surface of the Qixin, which was barely present in the outer hall, even the Qixin itself would marvel at this person's enlightenment. Unfortunately, he had fallen. If he hadn't, perhaps even the Qixin would have bowed to him as a teacher. Amidst the people's arguments, they failed to notice a superpower sneering at them in the void's crevices. This superpower was also the only living disciple of Qixin. Fengyu, don't be so absolute in your words. Wuxia lowered his voice amidst the cacophony. God Emperor Zhu Tian has been absent for so long. Even if he rushes back now, even with instantaneous movement all the way, it would take 1,000,000 years. If we use precious treasures for teleportation, it would still take tens of thousands of years. If we enter now, it's paving the way in advance for the God Emperor. If you don't provide useful information now, in case we encounter danger inside, it will be a significant loss for His Divine Majesty. Wuxia cleared his throat, his eyes shifting as he spoke in a hushed tone. Or should I say, His Divine Majesty shared information about Qixin Temple with you, and you kept it hidden privately. Indeed, his voice was hushed, but all the major emperors present, even the 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, clearly heard this statement. If mere mortals had been present, it might not have been audible. However, the person in that seat was no ordinary individual. Even if the voice was as faint as a mosquito's buzz, it was still distinguishable as originating from there. Moreover, this statement came from Qixue, a peak Tier 4 emperor. The words spoken by an expert of such stature could be considered law in many smaller worlds. Especially that last sentence, it practically let outsiders know. If they truly didn't want others to hear, a simple barrier could completely isolate them, silencing the words. Upon hearing these words, regardless of belief, a chill settled into the hearts of all. Regardless of whether anyone trusted her, she was now isolated. Even the emperors of the Eternal Tower found their trust in Demon Lord Fengyu wavering. Though these individuals were overlords in their own realms, exceptional beings among countless geniuses, before the grandeur of the Tao, they were just as fragile. Human nature thrives on comparison. Hearing this statement, whether they believed it or not, everyone would inevitably compare themselves. If they were in Demon Lord Fengyu's shoes and possessed certain Qixin Temple-related information, like how to gain entry, would they divulge it to others? This was a philosophical aspect of the path of seeking the Tao. Might rules alone. In just one word, the stronger one became, the lonelier they were. This kind of loneliness manifested itself in the ruthlessness displayed when competing for opportunities. Demon Lord Fengyu was a demon lord precisely because she disdained these despicable acts. If she could kill someone, she would never utter another word. Qixue, you're seeking death. Swish! The boundless power of the Eternal Tower shot out from Demon Lord Fengyu's palm, instantly transforming into countless towering figures suspended above Qixue's head. I'll say it once. Master has not responded to anything related to Qixin Temple. A hint of killing intent leaked from Demon Lord Fengyu's delicate face. Merely from appearances, it was hard to imagine that this slender girl suppressed all the major forces in the eastern region. Who knows? Qishui retreated into the Alliance Hall. Rest assured, since I have been recommended as the Alliance leader by all of you, I will naturally protect you all. Just stand behind me. Today, one want to see how strong this demon Lord Fengyu really is and how powerful the Eternal Tower's might can be. The passionate words spoken by Qishui might have convinced those who didn't know his character. First, he confronted demon Lord Fengyu, and now he used all the forces within the alliance as a shield. If he truly intended to fight against Emperor Fengyu, he could have just gone out and faced her, so why bother returning to the main hall? In their hearts, everyone cursed silently, but outwardly, they had to praise the righteousness of their leader. This scene amused Tongtian Buddha and Jin Wuyang. Indeed, he was a peak tier 4 emperor, capable of handling any situation flawlessly. This maneuver made Tongtian and Jin Wuyang secretly determined they would never collaborate with Qishui no matter the circumstances. His shamelessness surpassed the sum of their own. Great Sea region didn't have many strong individuals. There was only Jin Wuyang, who couldn't be considered a significant force. He was fine. Tongtian Buddha was different. He ruled over 3,000 great worlds and had dozens of emperor-level experts under his command. Although Dongyan and Wuliang each led their own faction, the overall situation was now irreversible. They couldn't stir up any waves. Dongyan had fallen, and the Dongyan realm naturally fell into his hands. Wuliang was considerably weaker and also needed him. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he could consolidate his power, but all of this hinged on Qishan Temple being the primary force. Behind Qishui, 6 Tier 4 emperors appeared, 2 of whom were at the peak of Tier 4. Facing Demon Lord Fengyu alone, he only had a 10% chance of winning but a 100% certainty of escaping with his life. Even though he wasn't afraid of Demon Lord Fengyu, he couldn't let the others in the Qishui alliance sit back and watch. Brother Qishui, we're here to help you. Several emperors spoke up, their words respectful. Yet their disdain for Qishui's actions was evident. Demon Lord Fengyu, don't think we small forces are easy targets. Following this, several Tier 3 emperors appeared one after another, standing behind Qishui and the few Tier 4 emperors. The powerful figures from the Eternal Tower emerged, observing the situation. Several Tier 4 emperors and dozens of Tier 3 emperors appeared behind Demon Lord Fengyu, exuding immense pressure. Although these emperors were displeased with Fengyu's sudden action, she was the ruler of the Eternal Tower. At this moment, they had to intervene to maintain order. Fengyu, hold on. Qishui suddenly called out, easing the tension among the crowd. With the Qishan Temple right in front of them and no benefits gained yet, no one wanted a conflict at this moment. A battle involving so many powerful beings would undoubtedly result in casualties. The cultivation path of emperor-level experts was arduous, and nobody wanted their own people to perish, let alone themselves. In the chaotic brawl of so many powerful beings, even a Tier 4 emperor could accidentally fall, not to mention the Tier 2 and 3 emperors. As for the ordinary Tier 1 emperors and Grand Yen Immortals, they didn't even have the ability to participate in the fight. In battles among powerful emperors, the residual might of their clashes could annihilate them. They didn't have the right to participate, let alone to watch. Fengyu glanced back at her own allies, sensing that they also preferred to avoid conflict for now. She softened her tone. Qishui, what else do you want to say? Fengyu, everyone knows we will have to fight sooner or later. But before we do, it's best if everyone picks a side. Qishui said, casting a glance at Tongtian Buddha, Jin Wuyang, and others who had already joined his alliance. The crowd inwardly cursed at his cunning nature. They knew this old man had ulterior motives. However, his words caught Fengyu's attention. Fengyu also glanced at the crowd, especially focusing on Jin Wuyang and Tongtian Buddha. Peak Tier 4 emperors were exceedingly rare, numbering less than 10 in the entire 1/4 of the universe in the Eastern Domain. They represented the absolute pinnacle of power. Particularly since the Tier 5 emperors were absent, the Eternal Tower couldn't rank at the forefront of peak forces. The main reason was the absence of a Tier 5 emperor. If they could now win the allegiance of 2 amazing Tier 4 emperors, they could easily suppress the Qishui alliance in future conflicts. In that case, everyone state your allegiance. If you are willing to join the Eternal Tower, you are most welcome. My master will return soon, and the Qishan Temple's fate will ultimately be decided by the Tier 5 emperors. You all should think it over carefully, Feng Yu warned, her words laced with both threat and caution. The powerful figures from the Eternal Tower emerged, observing the situation. Several Tier 4 emperors and dozens of Tier 3 emperors appeared behind Demon Lord Feng Yu, exuding immense pressure. Although these emperors were displeased with Feng Yu's sudden action, he was the ruler of the Eternal Tower. At this moment, they had to intervene to maintain order. Not only were they speaking to Jin Wuyang and Tongtian Buddha, but they were also trying to shake the confidence within the Qishui alliance. For them, a Tier 5 emperor was like a god, an irreversible existence. If they ended up with nothing in the end and offended a Tier 5 emperor, it was better to join the Eternal Tower early on. Humph! Qishui snorted coldly, looking somewhat embarrassed as he glanced at Jin Wuyang and Tongtian Buddha, and then at the strong individuals within the Qishui alliance. El won't hide it from you all. Chang Shintian of the Northern Domain has already contacted me secretly. They still have a position for a Grand Guest Officer. I could join them at any time, but I chose not to, Qishui said with a touch of generosity in his voice. He continued loudly, which one of us isn't a pride of heaven? Cultivation is not easy, and we still have to endure the oppression from those peak forces. Don't let their sweet talk deceive you. If you join these peak forces now, you will be cannon fodder. Even if the Tier 5 Emperor returns and seizes Qishan Temple, do you really believe they will share the spoils with you, the younger generation without background or strength? Don't dream. Opportunities are seized, not distributed. Wanderer Qishui's angry shouts actually frightened some ambitious solitary emperors. However, most of what he said was true. Joining peak forces at this time meant becoming cannon fodder. Even if they obtained Qishan Temple in the future, the Tier 5 Emperor would pick first, followed by a bunch of juniors. They wouldn't stand a chance. Although Demon Lord Feng Yu was a regional leader, she wasn't very articulate. Seeing this situation, she could only briefly describe the power of the Tier 5 Emperor to pacify them. But the stronger the Tier 5 Emperor was, the more they feared, afraid that they wouldn't even have the ability to resist in the future. Jin Wuyang considered quietly. He had no faction, no background, relying solely on his own strength. Joining the Eternal Tower at this moment seemed like a wise choice. With his strength, he was second only to Demon Lord Feng Yu in the Eternal Tower. Even if he became cannon fodder, he still had the power to survive. As for the Qishui alliance, he didn't consider it. Firstly, the distribution of benefits didn't suit him, and secondly, Qishui was too unreliable, always ready to run away. Ruler Feng Yu, I am Jin Wuyang. I am willing to enter the Eternal Tower. After careful consideration, Jin Wuyang didn't hesitate and directly bowed to Demon Lord Feng Yu. He even addressed her with the more flattering ruler, rather than Demon Lord, which sounded more pleasing. Jin Wuyang, have you considered carefully? By joining the Eternal Tower alone, you will face exclusion. Why not join the Qishui alliance with me? Tongtian Buddha had an urgent look on his face as he shouted. To outsiders, he appeared genuinely concerned for his friend. Only Jin Wuyang and Lu Ye understood that Tongtian Buddha had malicious intentions. Jin Wuyang, Wanderer Qishui's thoughts were cunning. How could he not understand Tongtian Buddha's scheme? He sighed deeply. Jin Wuyang, your choice is wise. I swear, Demon Lord Feng Yu, I won't let you face death in a losing battle. When our master returns, I will introduce you to him. And your Great Sea region will also be protected by our Eternal Tower. Demon Lord Feng Yu remained pragmatic, offering Jin Wuyang a reassuring pill. Tongtian Buddha looked on, a mix of envy and jealousy, yet he couldn't show it. Unlike Jin Wuyang, he didn't have the freedom to choose. If he were alone, he would have chosen the Eternal Tower. Even in the present circumstances, following Demon Lord Feng Yu was undoubtedly more reliable than following Wanderer Qishui. However, he had a large group of emperors and Grand Yen Immortals behind him. He could only join the Qishui alliance and take advantage of the alliance's benefits. Upon hearing Demon Lord Fengyu's promise, Zhen Wuyang repeatedly expressed his gratitude. "Thank you, Lord Fengyu. I will be at your service in every way." His words greatly pleased Demon Lord Fengyu. Though she held great influence in the Eternal Tower, the several top-tier emperors under her command also held significant power. She couldn't suppress them. Now, with Zhen Wuyang joining, he naturally wanted to pull him into her inner circle. Zhen Wuyang moved directly to the side of the Eternal Tower, positioning himself near Demon Lord Fengyu. He lagged half a step behind the other top-tier emperors to show his respect. The veteran powerhouses of the Eternal Tower, although not noticing much about Zhen Wuyang, recognized him as someone discerning. They all smiled and congratulated him, expressing their good wishes. Alliance leader Qishui, "I am willing to bring my strong warriors under the Alliance's banner." Tongtian Buddha's face was earnest as he led his people into the Grand Hall of the Qishui Alliance. This outcome didn't surprise anyone. Tongtian was indeed suitable for joining the Qishui Alliance. Besides, when Zhen Wuyang mentioned joining the Eternal Tower, Tongtian had already made his stance clear. The powerful beings in the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm had no choice but to follow him. Even if they had a choice, their strength was so weak that no one would consider them. It was better to follow Tongtian Buddha, enjoying the protection of a fourth-tier emperor, at least avoiding bullying within the Qishui Alliance. The Qishui Alliance was vast, with many powerful members. However, the top-tier experts were evenly matched. As a fourth-tier top expert, Tongtian Buddha ranked among the top 3 in the Qishui Alliance. The powerful figures in the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm benefited from this alliance. Upon their recent allegiance, they were placed directly at the top of the Qishui Temple, just below a few other major dominant forces. Despite the Tongtian Buddha possessing top-tier strength at Tier 4, their subordinate forces didn't quite match up. They were considered major powers, not quite reaching the pinnacle. This was primarily due to the formidable might of the Tongtian Buddha. Without their backing, these individuals wouldn't have held such prominent positions. Once these two individuals had firmly taken sides, the gazes of the others turned sharp. "How about we kill both of them first?" Qishui suggested, looking at the bound Luya and Daogong. Demon Lord Fengyu nodded in agreement. These two inheritors of the Qishan Temple had refused to divulge any specific information about the temple. Keeping them alive was a threat. It was better to kill them now. "You scum are unworthy of the great Qishan's blessing. A group of shallow practitioners daring to kill me," Daogong raved. He and Luya, just like the heroes of ancient times, refused to bow to Zhen Wuyang. Now they maintained the same attitude. Since they couldn't obtain the blessings of the Qishan Temple, no one else should harbor such delusions either. The brilliance of devouring the great Tao instantly covered his entire body. Even in death, he wanted to take a few unlucky ones with him. Boom! A force comparable to the self-destruction of the Donglin instantly swept across the entire void. "Enter the Eternal Tower. Quickly!" Demon Lord Fengyu's face turned pale. She hurriedly ushered some second- and third-tier emperors behind her into the Eternal Tower. As for the fourth-tier emperors, they had already teleported far away. Although Daogong's self-destruction couldn't kill them, it would injure them. Now was a critical moment in the battle for the Qishan Temple. If they got injured, the cost would far outweigh the gain. The second- and third-tier emperors found shelter within the Eternal Tower, but the fate of the Qishui Temple's many powerful individuals was grim. No matter how Qishui Wanderer tried to shield them, countless powerful streams of energy surged into the Qishui Temple. They killed a large number of Grand Yen Immortals and even caused the downfall of several unlucky Tier 1 emperors. Several breaths later, Daogong's aura finally completely dissipated. This time he had truly fallen. There would be no chance of revival. The primordial power of the leaning Great Tao transformed back into Yen power and returned to the universe's source. Learning from this experience, Wanderer Qishui and the Demon Lord Fengyu immediately charged towards Luya. "Do not force me. Do not forget. This is my Tao arena," shouted Luya in anger. Utilizing the origin within the great desolate wilderness, he broke free from the constraints. With one hand grasping the origin of the wilderness and the other holding the Tao of desolation, he stood his ground. Qi hesitated for a moment. Daogong was merely an ordinary fourth-tier emperor, while Luya was at the pinnacle of the fourth tier. Moreover, he controlled the great desolate wilderness, being the Tao ancestor of this land. If he chose to self-destruct, they would also be harmed. Why must you kill me? I can join any one of you, and we can negotiate. Luya's brows furrowed. He had already died once. He did not want to die again. Millions of years of accumulation left no room for error. He had given up the path of the Qixin Tao, which was the great devouring Tao, and instead, he controlled the great desolate wilderness. He was no longer the person he was in the ancient era, and now, he only wanted to survive and then become stronger with the help of the Qixin Temple. He didn't dare dream of becoming the universe master. Achieving the fifth-tier emperor satisfied him. That was also the reason he abandoned the Qixin Tao. "Oh, how do you propose we negotiate?" inquired Qi, his interest piqued. If Luya could provide useful information, perhaps sparing him was not out of the question. The main difference between them and Zhan and the Tongtian Buddha was that Luya and Daogong were both inheritors of the Qixin Temple. They were reluctant to say anything. If they left them alive and they entered the Qixin Temple again and fled with it, they would be in big trouble. They could feel the power of the Qixin Temple. If they were determined to leave, not to mention them, even a fifth-tier emperor could not stop them. When the meat is at your mouth, losing it would be a tremendous loss. If a fifth-tier emperor returned later, they would have no choice but to kill them. In the end, the Qixin Temple had never ceased its activities, and there were never any rumors of inheritors before. This opportunity was possibly the only one in countless chaos cycles. Luya, speak up. If it's beneficial to us, sparing your life is not out of the question. Demon Lord Fengyu also halted her movement. Both of them stared at Luya, fearing any sudden moves he might make. Two esteemed ones, the Qixin Temple isn't as great as you imagine. Luya swallowed hard, revealing everything about the Qixin Temple. As he said, there weren't many advantages to the Qixin Temple. Perhaps the only advantage was the Tao of the Qixin, incredibly powerful. Achieving the status of the Universe Master was not just a matter of enlightenment, but the crucial issue was Luya didn't believe anyone could replicate the Qixin's Grand Tao and reach the pinnacle of the universe. That's all I know. If you don't believe me, then I can only self-destruct. Qi and Fengyu fell into silence. If what Luya said was true, it seemed like the Qixin Temple didn't need their presence. The Grand Yen Immortals could handle it. Their role was merely to aid in the fusion of Daos. In the crevices of the void, concealed within, Wu's were watched silently, sneering. Exactly, it's not suitable for you at all. Hurry up and leave. Even if these people entered the trial, they wouldn't gain much. From Wu's perspective, their aptitudes were too poor. They wouldn't garner the true spirit's attention. It mainly depended on those fifth-tier emperors. Fengyu, what do you think? Qi turned to Demon Lord Fengyu beside him. At this moment, he truly didn't know what to do. Clearly disappointed with the Qixin Temple, what they wanted to hear was not this. They hoped to learn about how powerful the Qixin Temple was. They even wished Luya would self-destruct on the spot. Only then would they be more convinced that the treasures within the Qixin Temple were astonishing. They wanted to force the inheritor to self-destruct and still refuse to divulge any useful information. But everything didn't unfold as they had imagined. Let him live for now, but he will be suppressed within my eternal tower. Do you agree? Demon Lord Fengyu said calmly. Wanderer Qi understood. If something went wrong, it wouldn't be good for anyone. Although he didn't know if what Luya said was true, since they had inherited Qixin Temple for so many years, not to mention a fifth-tier emperor, they hadn't even been able to cultivate a top fourth-tier one. Either they were worthless, or Qixin Temple truly didn't have the legendary strength. Naturally, the power of the Eternal Tower is limitless. It's perfect for suppressing this person and preventing any mishaps, Qi said with a faint smile. Their relationship had also eased. Luya breathed a sigh of relief. At least he had saved his own life. But considering they had only recently revived, and now he was the only one left alive, it was a bit depressing. If they had known it would end like this, they might as well have joined Jin Wuyang in the ancient era. With Zhenwuyang's stunning talents in the ancient era, maybe they would all be fifth-tier emperors by now. They could have been protected, and perhaps their strength would be much greater than it is now. It was all Daegong's fault. He was someone who truly treated Qixin as a god, an absolute fanatic, just like the leaders in the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm utterly stubborn. Luya, who had come to terms with everything, even gave a slight smile to Zhenwuyang as they entered the Eternal Tower. From that smile, Zhenwuyang could feel Lu Ya's sincerity. This smile also completely dissipated the last glimmer of hope in the Great Sea region towards the ancient era. Zhenwuyang didn't feel good either. After all, he was a powerhouse of the Great Sea region. Although he hated these old guys, now the only surviving emperor of the ancient era had also been suppressed in the Eternal Tower, and he had also joined the Eternal Tower. How tragic. If in the ancient era he could have controlled Qixin Temple, how wonderful would that have been? Even if these emperors had allowed him to become a messenger in Qixin Temple, he wouldn't have suppressed them all, and he wouldn't have ended up in this situation. Since the ancient era was no more, the Great Sea region had also entered the era protected by the Eternal Tower. Zhenwuyang had become a powerful figure in the Eternal Tower. And at this moment, the entire universe was undergoing a transformation. The ancient chaotic battles had long disappeared, and the peaceful era accumulated over countless chaotic epochs was now shattered. Now, the age of Qixin was about to begin. A faint glow emanated from Qixin Temple, and an ancient call spread throughout the entire universe. In this moment, beings in every corner sensed the summons. It was the brilliance of ancient times, a vast scene presented in the minds of these beings. At this moment, all the Yen immortals in the universe took a step forward, entering the world of Qixin. Inside the Qixin Temple. The Qixin Temple appeared to outsiders as two separate halls, but it was more than it seemed. The outer hall of Qixin had spontaneously emerged from the source within the temple after Qixin's fall. It contained the profound teachings of Qixin and the three divine masters. Now, Qixin Temple was like a universe itself. It not only encompassed the source of the universe but also continuously created subsidiary worlds. These subsidiary worlds were like outer halls, interconnected with the inner hall, which was the true Qixin Temple. Yet, even the inner hall was just the tip of the iceberg. The real core was the source divine hall. The origin of the universe was grand and magnificent. It carried the entire universe's functioning. Practitioners were merely incidental products. Its power surpassed the imagination of any practitioner, explaining why there were so few universe masters in the river of time. The source divine hall, the core of Qixin Temple. A vaguely discernible elderly figure drifted within the vortex of source. In one hand he held an ancient book, and the other rested behind his back. El never expected to sleep for so long. The ancient era feels like just last night. The ethereal elder sighed as he perused the ancient tome. He was the true spirit of Qixin Temple, simultaneously a formidable being controlling the essence of the entire temple. His power rivaled that of the lords of the universe. This was why Qixin Temple, even after drifting through numerous epochs, remained unconquered by those universal masters. Great True Spirit, are you really planning to initiate the highest trial in the original universe? This seems different from what our master arranged back in the day. A guardian respectfully stood by, head bowed. He was genuinely puzzled, but he was merely a guardian. At most, he could voice his question. The true manager of the entire Qixin Temple was the True Spirit. Hearing his question, the True Spirit patiently explained, Qi, you don't understand. Indeed, our master didn't plan it this way back then. However, our master also told me that going with the flow surpasses everything else. Going with the flow? What does that mean? Qi, the guardian, was somewhat perplexed. Life is like a play, fool. The True Spirit laughed and scolded. As the True Spirit of the Qixin Temple and the controller of the primal power, his wisdom surpassed that of the cultivators. Even after such a long slumber, he remained as vibrant as life itself, experiencing joy and sorrow, laughter and sadness. The guardian pondered. He was once the servant of the old master. After the fall of the Qixin, he became the guardian, along with 8 others, tasked with watching over the Qixin's tomb for years. Oh right, after absorbing the Grand Yen Immortals into the affiliated worlds, temporarily restrain their battles. The living beings in this original universe are far from sufficient to activate the highest trial. The true spirit said calmly, dissatisfied with the number of Grand Yen Immortals in the original universe. If the emperors were to know, they would probably go crazy. All the Grand Yen Immortals in just one Great Sea region could be counted in billions. How many were there in the entire original universe? Yes, but the source in other universes are too strong. It's not easy to plunder extensively. The Guardian felt a bit uneasy. After all, he was just a Guardian. He had only recently started accepting the management of the Qixin Temple under the command of the True Spirit. Many things were still unclear to him. If he were suddenly sent to other universes to plunder Grand Yen Immortals, he wouldn't know what to do. The Grand Yen Immortals of the original universe were manageable because he could use the Qixin's virtual shadow formed by the source to directly move all the Grand Yen Immortals into the affiliated worlds of the Qixin Temple. But it would be troublesome to bring in Grand Yen Immortals from other universes. The source of the original universe had been devoured by the forbidden demon lord, making it weak. The universal source of the Qixin Temple could easily suppress others, and combined with the silent approval of the highest rules, he could easily summon all the Grand Yen Immortals into the affiliated worlds. However, the sources of other universes were intact, and the highest rules were emotionless. I've done what one can to help your original universe. One won't risk reaching into other universes. The True Spirit thought. Everything can be flexible. Since we can't bring all of them over, let's just bring the prodigies who have comprehended the third grade Tao. That should reduce the number by 90%, right? For universes far away, plunder the second grade Tao Grand Yen Immortals, and for those even farther, plunder the ultimate Tao Grand Yen Immortals. There are only a few of those in each universe. This should be simple, he suggested. That's easy. You are truly wise, my lord. Although the Guardian wasn't very clever, he knew how to flatter. Haha, since it can be done, go ahead boldly. I still need to think about how to deal with the Grand Yen Immortals and the Emperors. The True Spirit smiled and continued to peruse the ancient books in his hand. The Guardian immediately bowed and left the primal hall. In the vast primal source, only the True Spirit remained. He turned the pages of the book, his brows furrowing. This universe is quite interesting. So many prodigies were born simultaneously. It's probably because of that forbidden demon lord. The True Spirit muttered to himself. Yes, not bad at all. I finally completed this list. Satisfied, the True Spirit smoothed out his brows and directly replicated the contents of the ancient book onto a massive stone tablet. The stone tablet emitted an ancient aura. Although it appeared to be just a stone tablet, its value was no less than a top-tier eternal treasure. In the original universe, the only eternal treasure, the Eternal Tower, was merely a low-grade item. This was because the Emperor Zhutian was notorious for being overly protective. When he left, he couldn't rest assured about his disciples and old subordinates, so he left an eternal treasure that could assist them to his disciple. Many fifth-tier emperors in the River of Time did not have an eternal treasure. When the Emperor Zhutian was still a fourth-rank emperor, he obtained an inheritance from an ancient civilization when he first entered the River of Time. Not only did he obtain 3 eternal treasures, but he also inherited the true teachings of that ancient existence, directly advancing to a 5th-rank emperor. He became an incredibly powerful presence among the 5th-tier emperors. That was why he generously left the Eternal Tower to his disciple. Understanding Tongtian's intention, he immediately realized it was a suspicion aimed at certain emperors for their underhanded methods. Without delay, he leaped out of the grand hall. Fang Yu, explain this. Qishui's expression was furious. Tongtian had just pledged allegiance to him, and now such a thing happened. It was undoubtedly someone's hidden revenge. Otherwise, who would be so bored as to kill all the Yen Immortals from 3,000 worlds? Explain? Do I have anything to explain to you? Demon Lord Feng Yu was perplexed. She couldn't fathom what schemes Qishui was up to again. While the two were in a standoff, Zhen Wuyang received a message from Yuchang. All the Yen immortals within the Great Sea region had disappeared. Zhen Wuyang promptly informed Demon Lord Fengyu about the situation. This news caused an uproar. Messages from homeworlds kept pouring in one after another, reporting the disappearance of all Yen immortals. This must be the doing of Qixin Temple. Qishui nearly burst into laughter. It was truly audacious. All the Yen immortals in the entire universe had vanished. Leaving aside whether these Yen immortals were still alive, just the scale of this operation was colossal. No emperor could accomplish such a feat. As for whether they lived or died, Qishui couldn't care less. Buzz! An ancient aura suddenly surged. The aura emanated from Qixin Temple but manifested in the void of the entire universe. A massive stone stele descended from the void, visible to everyone in the universe. The Universe Deity Demon List. Original universe. Countless cultivators gazed up at the starry sky. A massive stone stele, resembling the sun and the moon, was visible from anywhere. Simultaneously, those Yen immortals who had entered the affiliated world of the Qixin Temple also saw the list. The Universe Deity Demon List was divided into heaven, earth, and human categories. The heaven category corresponded to emperor-level experts, the earth category to grand Yen immortals, and the human category naturally to those Yen immortals. However, the Yen immortals of the current era had been astonishingly brought into the Qixin Temple's affiliated world. As for the grand Yen immortals, they had long transcended the world's constraints, so the Qixin Temple couldn't astonish them. Yet, given such a tremendous opportunity, even if the temple didn't intervene, these grand Yen immortals would come on their own. As for the emperors, that went without saying. They were beings beyond the universe's control, yet they longed for the Qixin Temple even more. The rankings on the three lists were from top to bottom. The Heaven list featured over 10,000 Emperor-level experts. The list was arranged based on the strengths of the experts in the original universe. If emperors from other universes arrived, the Universe Deity Demon list would accurately judge and include them. This was an unparalleled eternal treasure, not only boundlessly powerful, but also able to accurately calculate an emperor's strength. "Look, there's the Patriarch's name on the Heaven list," exclaimed a young woman from the Dream Clan standing behind the Dream Dao Ancestor. This exclamation drew everyone's gaze. Dream Dao Ancestor, ranked 97th on the Heaven list, a top 4th-tier expert from the medium-grade world, Great Dream Realm. The introduction below the name stated clearly, even marking the expert's strength and the world where their Dao arena were located. In another part of the great desolate wilderness, Jian Wushuang and his companions also noticed this list. However, they had no time to spare. If the emperors from the heaven-reaching Buddhist realm didn't arrive soon, they would all perish here. "Brother Zhou Yu, when will the assisting emperors arrive? We can't hold on much longer," gasped Jin Hong, one of the geniuses from the Dongyan realm. They had been fighting against those monsters for a whole day. Their yen power had reached the point of exhaustion. If it weren't for the fact that, this time because of the Qixin Temple, they had exchanged all their assets for pills, they would have all perished already. Now, the pills were used up. If reinforcements didn't come soon, they could only meet their end here. In addition to dealing with these monsters, a portion of them also had to protect Jian Wushuang and Hu Qing, the two burdens. "Luo Shui, come back to me. You don't need to protect those two useless people. Hurry and take my place. I can't hold on anymore," Zhou Yu said, ignoring him completely. He had to give up on Hu Qing and Jian Wushuang. It was a matter of life and death now. Even if the emperors blamed him in the future, he could explain. After all, the Tao was difficult to traverse. He had become a 4th-tier complete grand Yen immortal with great difficulty. He couldn't die for someone else just because of an emperor's words. If he knew that their Emperor Dongyan had already fallen, he didn't know if he would be happy or sad. Luo Shui was also in a dire situation. Although the powerful monsters were being held off by those 4th-tier complete grand Yen immortals, she still had to deal with 2-9 revolutions level sprites. Even though she only had a 4th-grade Dao, she could still barely cope with these 2-9 revolution sprites who had no consciousness. However, she couldn't break free at the moment. What the Emperor had instructed naturally outweighed that genius from Dongyan realm. The Emperor's instructions cannot be abandoned, Luo Shui said softly but firmly. After speaking, she devoted her whole being to dealing with those two monsters, ignoring the genius. Jian Wushuang hid behind Luo Shui, his eyes fixed on the universe deity demon list. Hu Qing did the same. They had initially intended to help, but the sudden appearance of the stone tablet left them utterly stunned. Everyone present was momentarily baffled by its abrupt appearance, unsure of what had transpired. However, amidst the chaos, they scarcely spared it a glance before plunging back into the battle. Jian Wushuang and Hu Qing, on the other hand, were entranced by the universe deity demon list. Whether it was their own intuition or the list assisting them in identifying their rankings, they immediately spotted their names at first glance. Hu Qing, rank 160 million, 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, hailing from the high-grade world of heaven-reaching Buddhist realm. High-grade world? It seemed that, unconsciously, heaven-reaching Buddhist realm had already restored the source of the heavenly realm. Narrowing his eyes, Hu Qing studied the list, which laid bare the true strength of many individuals. For instance, Tongtian Buddha was no longer just a Tao ancestor. He had ascended to the position of a ruler. As for himself, he was ranked 160 million, a considerably high position in the entire universe, especially considering he was only a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Most of those ranked higher than him were close to the 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals, with only a few of them being 9-turn Grand Yen Immortals. Jian Wushuang's ranking was not too different from Hu Qing's, despite being only a 3-turn Grand Yen Immortal. At the same time, many powerhouses also noticed Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, rank 167,849,099, 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, originating from the middle realm of Great Sea region. A 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal managing to secure a position around 167 million astonished many Grand Yen Immortals, making them question whether the list was erroneous. To understand, it's crucial to know that almost all the 5 billion Grand Yen Immortals were at the 9th revolutions level. There were only a few scattered individuals at the 6 revolutions level among them. Each of these individuals was extraordinary, especially those 6th revolutions Grand Yen Immortals who ranked among the top 2 billion. They represented the pinnacle of the ultimate path. But a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal somehow managed to secure a position among the 160 millionth rank. This fact was beyond belief for everyone. The names on the list seemed endless, but only the top trillion were displayed. Among these trillion, less than 10% were at the 3 revolutions level, most being at the 6 revolutions level. This gave an idea of just how remarkable Jian Wushuang's rank was. Jian Wushuang himself was not surprised by his rank. He was well aware of his own strength, much stronger than 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals but weaker than those at the perfected 9 revolutions level. He looked upward all the way to the top. Information about billions of people appeared in his mind. Such memory capacity was effortless for Jian Wushuang at the Grand Yen Immortal level. He could even easily do this at the Yen Immortal level. Luo Shui, 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, ranking over 400 million. Jian Wushuang shook his head bitterly. His focus wasn't on those ordinary Grand Yen Immortals. He directly turned his attention to the top 1,000 ranks. Zhou Yu, ranking 456, perfected 9 revolutions Circle Grand Yen Immortal, from the high-grade world of heaven-reaching Buddhist realm. This ranking surprised Jian Wushuang. He hadn't expected Zhou Yu to be so powerful. Although he had heard that Zhou Yu had integrated several Tao paths, considering this ranking spanned the entire universe, being within the top 500 was extraordinary.